I saw it this morning.
Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. I'm going to ask everybody, please rise, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our witnesses. The purpose of today's hearing is to understand the importance of winning the AI arms race against the Chinese Communist Party and explore ways to ensure America dominates the defining technology of the 21st century. And I'm now going to recognize myself for an opening statement. Actually, I'm going to do unanimous consent first. I do ask unanimous consent that the chairman of the House Committee on Intelligence and Representative Crawford and Representative Molinar of Michigan be allowed to sit on the dais and participate in today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Winning the AI arms race is key to America's national security and our economic security. The outcome of this race, it directly affects military competitiveness of the United States of America versus China. It is that black and white. And because AI works to improve other AI, this is a very unique race where the further you get ahead, the further you get ahead. This committee worked hard to get smart on all things AI, otherwise known as the AI stack. We've heard from those who make chips, those who make the machines that make chips, those that model chips, those that use chips. And that will continue through the next year. It is a fact that the AI arms race directly impacts our military competitiveness with China. That cannot be disputed. Among many capabilities, advanced AI enables military command and control. AI powers intelligence. AI powers surveillance. It powers cyber operations. AI powers analysis and data crunching. It powers autonomous weapons and nuclear modernization. AI dominance can decide who sees first, who decides first, and who strikes first. Those are some of the stakes. The United States of America is in the lead. We have an advantage over China. We know the pitfalls if China has an advantage over us. But in this circumstance, we have a clear advantage. That advantage did not happen by accident. America has amazingly creative people in amazing companies that innovate and continue to further advance the capabilities within our borders and beyond, in AI and 1,000 other spaces. Right now, America is ahead. Right now, chips made by American companies are the best in the world. Right now, America's cloud companies power AI worldwide. Right now, our models dominate global markets. That dominance is because of our nation's inventors and thinkers and entrepreneurs. But that dominance cannot be taken for granted as China tries to catch up. Why? Because these chips, they're not just kids playing video games on an Xbox, playing war games. They affect real wars, real weapons, real war powers, and they will be a part of bringing about real casualties. If anything, this is the highest of compliments. NVIDIA has made such good chips that if they were sold freely to the CCP would likely overtake us in the AI arms race. NVIDIA's chips are so much better than what China can make themselves that Chinese AI labs desperately want as many of these chips as they can get their hands on. That's a quantifiable fact. And Xi Jinping hates how badly that they need our chips. The evidence is already clear. When President Trump first imposed export controls back in 2019 by blocking the most advanced chip-making tools to China, our lead grew. Why? Because China cannot produce cutting-edge AI chips at scale. They can't do that. What does that mean? It means, number one, their chips are crappy compared to what Jensen Huang makes. And number two, if they try to make 100 of them, they're lucky if they get 30 of them to work. China is doing everything that they can to catch up and dominate us. So instead of our cloud companies dominating global markets, it would be China. Make no mistake, if China buys a chip, they are buying it so they can take it from an American company, or they are buying it to put a Chinese company ahead of an American company, or they are buying it to make the Chinese military better than the United States military. That is their goal. Instead of the US military having the AI advantage, the Chinese military would have the AI advantage. Just this month, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced the Department of War's AI strategy that said point blank, AI will redefine the character of war over the next decade. Our secretary demands 21st century technological supremacy in AI, hypersonics, and drones. Our oversight needs to keep pace with the challenge we are facing. That is why I wrote a bill called AI Overwatch that ensures our cutting-edge AI chips cannot be used by the Chinese military. It is modeled after what we already do on foreign military sales. The principle is the same. When an export shifts America's military advantage, Congress has a role to play. Advanced chips absolutely shift military advantage. AI Overwatch would include chips with those same guardrails and those in future advanced chips. As chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I have to review all military sales. When it comes to who we sell a fighter jet to, or who we might sell a fighter jet engine to, or a missile that would go on the wing of a fighter jet, or the avionics for a fighter jet. We review all of those things. If there is a potential sale of a military-enabling chip to anybody, Congress needs to have oversight of that. When we are talking about what's going on with AI, chip dominance, cloud dominance, model dominance, we're talking about private companies in places like China that are purchasing chips for applications that will ultimately assist militaries of our foreign adversaries. Not every chip sale is a military sale. Many of them are. When we're talking about chip sales, we're talking about private companies, in many cases, like DeepSeek, or Alibaba, or Tencent, among others, that are direct contractors working for the Chinese Communist Party, working to advance military dominance, working for the Chinese military, working to make their military more dominant by buying our chips. It's not complicated, it's that simple. Should Congress have oversight when selling missiles to other countries? Yes. The same should be said for chips. We want to enable the greatest AI capabilities for the United States. The Secretary of War laid it out plain for AI acceleration in the 21st century. 21st century technological supremacy. That is what AI Overwatch is about. That is what this hearing is about. AI acceleration strategy for America, for the 21st century, for supremacy for America. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Your insights will help us fight this fight, and I look forward to today's discussion. That being said, I now recognize, do you have a statement, an opening statement? You have no statement.
Mr. Meeks will deliver one when he returns.
Very good. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this important topic. Mr. Matt Pottinger, former Deputy U.S. National Security Advisor who led President Trump's export control strategy during the first Trump administration. Mr. Orin, founder and chief economist at American Compass. And Mr. John Feiner, former principal deputy U.S. National Security Advisor who served during the Biden administration. This committee recognized the importance of the issues before us and is grateful to have you here to speak with us today. Your full statements will be made a part of the record, and I'll ask each of you to keep your spoken remarks as close to 5 minutes as you can in order to allow time for member questions. And that, Mr. Pottinger, I now recognize you for any opening statement that you may have.
Chairman Mast and Ranking Member Meeks and distinguished members of the committee, I'm really privileged to testify today. I'd like to spend just a few minutes dispelling some of the myths that have misled our government down the wrong path in our competition with China on artificial intelligence. But first, I just want to say a word about what's at stake. Imagine if the question before you today was whether to sell China the propulsion systems that make our nuclear submarines stealthy, or to debate whether to sell China a prototype of our F-47 fighter so that they could reverse engineer it, or to help Beijing paralyze our power grids through cyber attacks. We'd all laugh at the premise that there's anything to debate. Yet the United States has effectively taken a step toward all those outcomes and more by relaxing export controls and preparing to sell China the advanced chips that they need to try to surpass us in artificial intelligence. The security implications are clear. Selling NVIDIA's H200 chips to China will supercharge Beijing's military modernization, enhancing capabilities in everything from nuclear weapons to cyber warfare, autonomous drones, biological warfare, and intelligence and influence operations. It'll also help China's subsidized companies compete with American AI developers, putting at risk hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. investment at precisely the moment that transformational capabilities are emerging. And AI isn't just a pivotal technology, it is the pivotal technology that will determine whether the United States and its allies or an axis of totalitarian regimes lead in virtually all technologies, military and commercial. President Trump has made clear he wants to win this competition. His team, however, may not be aware of how damaging the administration's decision to sell to China H200 is to that goal. The first task is to obliterate faulty arguments that have put U.S. policy on the wrong track. Myth number one is that China has nearly caught up to the United States. AI leadership boils down to who has the best engineers, the most data, the cheapest electricity, the most effective marketing, and crucially, the most powerful computers. China is making strides in most areas, but the United States holds an ace card. We have privileged access to the most powerful chips in the world. American companies design them. Friendly countries like South Korea and Taiwan produce them. And this is thanks in no small measure to President Trump's groundbreaking export controls in his first term. China's inability to produce advanced semiconductors at scale is the central bottleneck preventing it from overtaking us in AI. Oddly, some people argue that China is catching up so fast that we may as well lift the controls. Quote, China is nanoseconds behind America in AI, is how NVIDIA's CEO put it last November. But China's own leaders are far less confident. Last April, China's ruler Xi Jinping instructed the Politburo to, quote, face up to the gap, close quote, in core AI technologies. In December, Beijing set aside nearly $70 billion more for chip subsidies on top of the $145 billion that they've spent over the past decade or so. So these aren't the actions of a competitor only nanoseconds behind. They're signs of desperation. Just days ago, a top Alibaba AI scientist in China forecast that there's only about a 20% chance at best that the world's leading AI company will be Chinese in 5 years. The chief scientist at another Chinese AI company, Zhipu AI, noted that, quote, the gap may not be narrowing, it might even be widening, close quote. Leading Chinese chip company Huawei can make only a fraction the number of chips as its closest Western competitor and with only a fraction of the computing power. The second myth is that we can make China addicted to U.S. chips. Beijing utterly dismisses that premise. Quote, even if we introduce NVIDIA chips, our determination to pursue independent innovation will remain unwavering, is how the vice chairman of China's Semiconductor Industry Association put it last week. He continued, quote, the purpose of importing those chips is to catch up better, and catching up will eventually lead to running alongside or even taking the lead, he said. In other words, Beijing views NVIDIA chips just as a stopgap to help it leapfrog the United States. Finally, is the myth that we've already lost the AI race. This is, in some ways, the most dangerous myth, this idea that China's momentum is unstoppable and that America should accept decline. This is defeatism. America still holds the high ground. Our companies design the world's most advanced chips, and they dominate global cloud infrastructure. Here's quickly how to keep it that way. First, let China's leaders struggle to reinvent the wheel. If China wants to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to stay in second place on chip making, they should be our guest. The Soviets made the same mistake trying to replicate Ronald Reagan's Star Wars missile defense. Second, reverse the decision to sell China advanced AI chips. Congress needs to put guardrails in place so that this mistake can't be repeated. Third, get our allies to level up. The Netherlands and Japan still sell advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China long after US firms have been prohibited by Washington from the China market. So we need to push allies to match our export controls fully. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pottinger. Thank you, Mr. Cass. I now recognize, Mr. Cass, I now recognize you for any opening statement you may have.
Good morning, Chairman Mast, Ranking Members Meek, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. My primary message to the committee is this: advanced AI compute is essential to the AI era, enabling both economic dynamism and novel military capabilities. Denying our foreign adversaries access to this resource, then, is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security. Now, I should confess that is not my own message. I copied it verbatim from the Trump administration's AI action plan, thoughtfully developed when the White House moved through a reasoned policy process last year. Again, the administration's stated policy, which is exactly correct, is that advanced AI compute is essential to the AI era, enabling both economic dynamism and novel military capabilities, and denying our foreign adversaries access to this resource is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security. Consistent with that reality, the Trump administration moved last year to impose robust export controls on advanced AI chips, prohibiting the sale even of NVIDIA's less powerful H20 chip, which the Biden administration had intended to license. But we are here today because the administration has inexplicably reversed course and is now poised to begin licensing the sale to China of NVIDIA's H200, a far more advanced chip in mass quantities. I regret to say that U.S. policy has been seemingly reshaped by business executives who promote China as a partner and prioritize short-term profit over the national interest. Most prominently, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has argued that even the term China hawk should be a badge of shame, and he's argued that China's leaders, quote, want companies to come to China and compete in the marketplace, and that we should take statements by the Chinese Communist Party, quote, at face value. Of course, under our Constitution, citizens have the right to petition their government, no matter how unwise their ideas. But also under our Constitution, it is the people's representatives, not multinational corporations, that set national policy to ensure that it advances the national interest. When it comes to AI, that process has broken down, and Congress must intervene. I had some difficulty preparing this testimony because it is hard to know how to make the case for something so self-evidently true as the proposition that the United States should deny China access to advanced AI chips. As Chairman Mast just said, it's not complicated. As Mr. Pottinger said, we'd all laugh at the premise in almost any other context. But it's worth underscoring exactly why this is the case. First, the total amount of computational power available in a country is quickly becoming a key determinant of its technological capabilities for both economic and military purposes. As models have come to rely more heavily on inference, meaning the computation required to complete a task, the ability to expand capacity with the fastest, most cost-effective, and most energy-efficient chips has become increasingly vital. Second, as you've heard, the United States holds a decisive advantage over China. Leading-edge chip design and manufacturing are controlled by the United States and our allies. And analysts estimate that export controls imposed by the first Trump administration and extended by the Biden administration helped the United States to build a 5-fold advantage in total computational capacity. Third, as investment in AI infrastructure surges, chip manufacturers are struggling to meet demand. NVIDIA has repeatedly declared itself, quote, sold out, and customers have faced long wait times. More recently, the chip on wafer on substrate packaging process and the high bandwidth memory critical for inference have become bottlenecks. Redirecting supply toward China will not only boost its technology sector, but also hamper ours. Thanks to short-sighted action by policymakers and corporations, the United States has already given away leadership in key technologies and supply chains to China. Our leadership in AI represents a crucial countervailing advantage that we must leverage if we are to maintain our military superiority and rebuild our industrial base. Blundering instead into exactly the same mistake yet again, like Charlie Brown chasing after Lucy's football, giving away this crucial technology because CEOs believe they can win in China and investors want to make a quick buck, would be an unconscionable error of world historical proportions. Setting export control policy is ultimately the responsibility of Congress. Legislation like the AI Overwatch Act would be an important step forward and is well aligned with the executive branch's AI action plan. Its requirements would ensure that licensing decisions are appropriate, the reasoning is well articulated, and the decision makers are accountable to the American people. What is going on now behind closed doors cannot continue. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. I now recognize you, Mr. Feiner, for any opening statement that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Mast, ranking member, members of the committee, it's an honor to be here with you today in my personal capacity on a matter of such enormous consequence. I've been privileged to serve our country on national security issues for most of the past 17 years. In that time, I've worked on no issue more important than the competition between the United States and the People's Republic of China. I actually arrived in Hong Kong in 2001 during a time of what felt like great promise. The story since then has become infinitely more complicated, and I need not reprise it all here. But suffice it to say, many of the assumptions about China's trajectory and intentions of that period proved wildly optimistic and just plain wrong. Most consequentially for today's hearing, more than a decade ago, the Chinese government embarked upon a concerted effort to dominate the emerging technologies of the future, as well as their supply chains. The goal was to make China less dependent on the rest of the world, while making the rest of the world more dependent on China. The PRC's Made in China 2025 initiative and related policies were a blueprint for achieving technological primacy. And now that the year 2025 has come and gone, we can see the profound and problematic impact these policies have had all too clearly. Across these areas where China's trajectory has defied American expectations and challenged important U.S. interests and values, our country has benefited from the emergence of a new bipartisan consensus for which the first Trump administration deserves genuine credit, updating U.S. assumptions and strategies to make competition the hallmark of U.S. policy toward China. The Biden administration built on key elements of our predecessor's approach, including by treating competition with China, particularly in the military and critical and emerging technology domains, as a top national security priority. Specifically, the Biden administration supplemented the Trump approach in at least two important ways: by working with this body to provide infusions of capital to our industrial base, and by enhancing our alliance relationships, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, as a force multiplier for American power and influence. One of the main reasons the United States has been able to mount this meaningful, if much needed, and still unfinished response to the threats posed by China is sustained, strategic, and bipartisan policy work across multiple administrations and both the executive and legislative branches of the government. Ultimate success, however, is far from secure. The stakes of U.S.-China competition have only grown higher, and the most hotly contested area determining who eventually prevails will be this intense technology competition between the world's two leading powers and the economic and military strength that flows from it. Alongside the policy initiatives I've already described to promote American advantage in core areas of technology, the first Trump and Biden administrations also sought to protect America's lead in key areas of this race by placing controls on the most important inputs that fuel it: advanced semiconductors and the tools needed to fabricate them. Like other areas of economic statecraft, such as sanctions, export controls are not a one-off fix. They require relentless vigilance, iterative adjustment, and, when necessary, escalation. And importantly, they are strongest when both the executive and legislative branches of government reinforce each other's actions to maximum effect. Here again, the first Trump administration deserves credit for taking the first steps with our allies on export controls, and the Biden administration built on this effort, coordinating with allies and partners to impose comprehensive multilateral restrictions on the most advanced chips and tools. Perhaps the best indication that this approach has generally hit the mark is that in both public statements and private conversations, Chinese officials gradually elevated U.S. technology restrictions from what felt like a secondary concern to the very top of their grievance list, alongside core interests such as the future of Taiwan. Over time, the PRC increasingly sought to link such national security issues to other areas of mutual tension, such as the various economic and trade disputes between our countries, a linkage that the Biden administration rejected, adhering to a principle that national security necessities were not up for negotiation. This is particularly true for AI chips, nearly all of which are designed and sold by American companies, and the advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment needed to make them, where US, Dutch, and Japanese companies dominate the market. Together, these technologies enable the US's most important remaining advantage in the AI race, a substantial lead in compute needed to train and operate large language models. China's leaders increasingly see AI as not just one of many technology priorities, but as the critical technology that will enable their economic and military ambition. And I am aware of no evidence that suggests China has any intention of slowing down its breakneck push to indigenize chip production, even if and as it acquires more capable US AI chips in the meantime. So for many reasons, now is not the time to take our foot off the gas or to replicate the sort of complacency and overconfidence of a bygone era, only this time with far less margin for error and higher stakes. The PRC's success in this race will enable it to extend its military power and influence across the region and beyond in ways inimical to our interests, if not our way of life. Thank you again for the opportunity to explore these issues with you, and I look forward to your questions.
I want to thank you all for your statements. I'm now going to recognize members for questions that they may have. I'm going to begin with myself. I think I may only get through one question, but I thought it was a great, profound story that I had read. Mr. Pottinger, you were a reporter in your past life, and I know that you spent time reporting on China and Huawei, and I think you have a story that is very analogous to what's going on in this, about telecom companies selling to Huawei at the time, thinking that they were going to cut their legs out from under them, so to say. And I wonder if you would just share that story, because I can't think of a better analogy to really illustrate the situation I think that we're in.
Chairman Mass, thanks so much. In fact, I in a previous life, I was a reporter covering China for the Wall Street Journal at the same time that John Feiner was writing for the Washington Post in China, which is where we first met. One of the beats that I covered was the telecommunications beat, and this was at a time when the United States was absolutely dominant in telecoms. Remember, of course, Bell Labs, which invented transistors. The whole computer revolution began here in the United States, and companies that were spun out of that, like Lucent Technologies and Bell Labs, were making the telecommunications equipment that China was importing to build out its cell phone networks and the like. And they had a dominant lead. Other Western companies as well, like Nortel Networks, Marconi in the UK, Motorola used to be in this space. You had companies like Alcatel in France. They're all out of business now. They don't exist anymore. These were companies that employed hundreds of thousands of people because China used that equipment to leapfrog ahead and destroy their competition, and now to virtually monopolize telecommunications infrastructure. So what they would do is steal IP, subsidize to the tune of tens upon tens of billions of dollars, domestic champions like Huawei, and then go compete in other markets, both compete in China, but also start out in the global south, as we now call it, and eventually make their way to Europe and wipe the United States out of the entire business of telecommunications, which is where we are today. Without any sense of irony here, it's actually the same Chinese companies that are trying to do the same thing again. It's Huawei that is going to try to destroy American chip designers and manufacturers using the same playbook. Suck them in, get their equipment, use the American equipment, subsidize it in order to then start stealing market share around the world, and then destroy their access. No one gets addicted to the American technology. The policy is to destroy American involvement in that whole sector, and then win the future. So we're watching the same bad movie all over again.
Yeah. What would you give? Simply, I mean, I think you laid it out, but give a lesson learned. What would you say to those that are working on AI policy today?
Yeah, first, do no harm. There is no future for any American company in China when China's national policy is to only suck them in as far as they need to learn, steal, subsidize, and then destroy the competition. So we should not be selling even the previous generation of NVIDIA chips, the H20s that Orin was just referring to. Now we're going to head to a far more powerful chip that is virtually state-of-the-art.
So when they come out with the Rubin chip, we shouldn't step back and start selling Blackwell chips.
The hundreds of billions of dollars that are going into building this data center, they don't just upgrade to Rubin chips. These are American companies that are spending hundreds of billions of dollars. They're investing for the long term in current generation technology. They can't just throw out the data centers that they're investing in now just because a new generation of chip comes out. We can see that these incredible advances in AI that are taking place are actually on even older generation chips. So we don't want to just maintain a little marginal lead. We want to absolutely expand, continue to expand our lead over the People's Republic of China.
I think this is a difficult subject. It's not an intuitive subject for most people when you talk about the full stack of AI, right? Unless this is what they went to school for, it's not intuitive. And so if you can't even see vividly what's directly in front of you with this technology, it's very difficult to understand where the future can be in a year, much less 5 or 10 years, if you don't have that education in it, that imagination for it. So take that and tell me, what are the risks that we face in the future? Where can we get to that most people aren't even tracking that this could bring us to this place in the future?
Yeah, I think we have to be humble to your point about thinking that we can see how far China could go if it had really advanced chips, or assume that they can't catch up. Gordon Moore, the great genius who helped, he created Moore's law that said that chips will shrink in size and expand exponentially every 2 years in power. I was watching a documentary. Even he, the guy who created, in many ways, the computer era, didn't realize that personal computers were going to become a thing. He was building chips at the time for big mainframes. So, I mean, the whole revolution that he brought about, he couldn't even see the implications right in front of him until after things started to move. So we don't want to give Beijing the chance to surprise us and to go beyond our imagination, because there's no such thing as civilian in one compartment, civilian uses, and then military uses in another. China has a national strategy called military-civil fusion. It's literally national policy that all civilian and commercial technology must serve the interests of China's military modernization.
Thank you. Representative Obama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Today's hearing is titled Winning the AI Arms Race Against China. But let's be very clear. President Trump isn't winning. He's losing. And it's worse. He's empowering China. He's handicapping the United States' AI superiority by opening the door for China to purchase NVIDIA's H200 chips, as we've discussed this morning. He's sabotaging our national security by auctioning off our most advanced technology to the highest bidder. And his aggression towards Venezuela and Greenland is creating a dangerous permission structure for Chinese and Russian aggression towards Taiwan and Ukraine. Misstep after misstep, Trump keeps stacking the deck for China and against the United States. Now, while the president pushes problematic policies, we must work across the aisle in the spirit of bipartisanship that you've articulated this morning, witnesses, to actually out-innovate our enemies and win this race. This is not about ego. It's about technological superiority on and off the battlefield. It's about protecting U.S. innovation. It's about growing American jobs. And if we want to win the AI arms race, we must be thoughtful about how we protect our advanced chips, period. I'll start with Mr. Pottinger and go down to each of our panelists. Do you agree with this statement, yes or no? H200 chips are the building blocks of AI superiority and are integral to modern military applications. The country that controls these chips will control AI technology. The country that controls AI technology will control the future.
I agree with the spirit of that comment, yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes, likewise.
Same answer for me.
That's a quote directly from Trump's Department of Justice, released mere hours before the president announced his approval of H200 chip sales to China. I ask for unanimous consent to enter this press release into the record. Why did the Department of Justice contradict the president? Because it's the truth. And because the Justice Department had rightly just shut down a smuggling ring that illegally exported H200 chips to China. Trump's own Justice Department believes that Chinese access to H200 chips will damage our national security. And I agree. That's why Ranking Member Meeks and I demanded Commerce Secretary Lutnick provide us with the rationale for the approval of the sale of these H200 chips and details on how the approval will be implemented. Yesterday, the Bureau of Industry and Security went one step further and made it easier to sell H200 chips to China by easing its license review policy. The H200 chip has 6 times more processing power than the current U.S. export controls to China. It's truly like Trump is handing our opponents our coordinates in the middle of a battle. Why are we giving up our advantage? So, Mr. Feiner, can you tell me how selling H200 chips to China undermines the United States' advantage over China in manufacturing advanced processing power? And does that threaten our national security, given your recent proximity to the issue?
Well, starting with your last part of your question, yes, I believe it does undermine national security, and it does it in a few very clear and particular ways. One, as I think all of us have said in our opening statements, there is currently a gap in one key area of the elements that go into who will win the AI race, and that is compute. There are 2 elements that go towards how China can try to fill that gap. They can try to get more advanced chips from the West, principally from the United States, and they can try to get more advanced tools from the countries that make those tools, the United States, the Dutch, and the Japanese. Tools in order to be able to indigenize and make these chips themselves. The strategy, again, that goes across the first Trump administration and the Biden administration has been to deny them access to those 2 key inputs that would allow them to close what is still a massive gap in compute. Right now, China can only make about 1 to 3% of the computing power that the Western ecosystem, the democratic ecosystem, can produce. I can't think of any good reason why we should allow them to fill that gap, given the role that AI plays in any number of national security areas. Matt did a very good job, Mr. Pottinger, of articulating them, but they go towards how AI will be a key factor in military technology, in intelligence technology, in biotechnology that can be used to develop novel pathogens and weapons, in cyber attacks, and there have been a number of recent disclosures in that space that can be enabled by AI, especially AI backed by massive compute. So I think the answer to your question is overdetermined, but that's my answer.
Well, I hope the subheadline of this hearing and the message of the Trump administration should be, I can't think of any good reason. With that, I yield back.
Chairman Emeritus McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for bringing this issue to the forefront. I think it's one of the most important issues facing this committee. The great power competition with China rivals, when I was growing up, the Cold War against Russia in the space race. And for years, we thought we could work with China as business partners. As you, Mr. Pottinger, Mr. Feiner, were covering China at that time, I was a young federal prosecutor in the Justice Department investigating the case of the re-election of Bill Clinton and campaign dollars flowing from China into the campaign coffers of the DNC. Why? Because they wanted the competitive advantage of our technology. What I found were deposit slips in Johnny Chung's bank account from China Aerospace in a meeting with the director of military intelligence where they talked about this very issue. They wanted our technology back then in 1997, and they want it today. It's even worse, far worse today than it was in 1997. And I think y'all have laid the case out very clearly in terms of what the threat is today. You know, they steal so much intellectual property from this country, but we don't have to sell it to them. And that's the axiom that led me to introduce the Enforce Act. Very simply, you cannot sell military-grade AI technology to China. I marked it up out of this committee. It went to the floor, and then it was blocked from a floor vote because of outside special interest groups at play in this debate. And let's be honest, there are outside special interest groups trying to block this, what we were talking about today, and that kind of legislation. I commend the chairman for his bill, and I support it. My U.S. attorney in Texas, as these H200 chips were smuggled into China, said, quote, "These chips form the building blocks of AI superiority and integral to modern military applications." So this agreement with NVIDIA, we met with the CEO, and I asked him, you sold them the very chips that they use to create DeepSeek AI. AI opens the windows, the chairman said, to military-grade applications. You sold them the technology that now has given them DeepSeek AI. Granted, it was legal until we caught up with it with export controls, but it demonstrates why those controls are so important. I want to ask Mr. Pottinger this question. You said the vice chairman, I always love using the enemy's words against them, right? But the vice chairman of China's Semiconductor Industry Association said that he believes that they need NVIDIA chips to, quote, catch up. Or in other words, Beijing needs NVIDIA chips to take the lead in this great power competition. Is that an accurate statement, and can you expand on that?
Very good to see you, sir. Thank you. That's right. I have a fuller quote in my submitted testimony, but Wei Shaojun is the vice chairman of the China Semiconductor Industry Association. So in China, industry associations aren't like they are here in the United States. The founding charter of the China Semiconductor Industry Association says that their purpose is to uphold Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, and Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. So it's basically an appendage of the party state. What he was saying just last week is that we're going to use NVIDIA chips to leapfrog NVIDIA over time. We're going to use NVIDIA chips to leapfrog the United States in AI. That is the policy. It's very explicit.
And essentially saying we're going to use NVIDIA chips to defeat the United States in the great power competition. Those are my words, but I think it's very clear the intention behind his statement. Now, their argument is this, when you talk to them, you know, we just need to get them hooked on our chips. These are second generation chips. We need to hook them on our chips so they don't manufacture them themselves. And by the way, we need to compete with Huawei in their own market so we have market share against Huawei. Do you buy that statement, Mr. Pottinger?
Sorry,
Do you buy that statement that we need to hook them on our technology and sell them our technology and compete with them in their own market?
China's leaders, in their own words, utterly reject the premise that they will allow their country to become addicted. And by the way, Chinese companies have, from what I'm reading, have ordered 2 million of these chips. The Chinese government may not actually let them import all of those chips because they want to mandate that Chinese companies continue to buy inferior Huawei chips at the same time until Huawei, they hope, can catch up. They'll use the more advanced AI that they're getting from the American chips, they'll use to compete with American companies and also to advance Huawei's planning and designs to catch up. So NVIDIA may actually be sort of seeding its own demise.
Anytime we compete with China in their own market, we lose market share. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Emeritus. Before we move on, I want to submit for the record a document by the Bureau of Industry Security, Department of Congress, released yesterday, 1/13/2026. It is the rule regarding sales of H-20 and H-200s, and I want to thank the administration for putting this forward, outlining no sales to Chinese military, no harm to American availability, and so I submit this for the record without objection. So ordered. And I now recognize Representative Sherman.
Thank you. I'm going to spend about 1 minute on what everybody else is talking about because I think it's already been covered pretty well. I think the chair gave a great statement as to why we shouldn't be doing this. And then we have the president gets us a 15% cut on everything NVIDIA sells, or a lot of what they sell. I'll ask our panel here, should we sell F-35s to China if we get a 15% rake off for the U.S. Treasury? Does anybody think that's a good idea? I'll just, yes or no answer.
Terrible idea.
Have not heard of that.
We should not.
Easy question. And the former chair points out all the money and power that is against us here. But there's an area where there's even more money and power, and that is the basic issue of AI's domestic use, its development. There was a letter signed by, I believe, Elon Musk and many other luminaries back in March of 2023, calling for a pause for 6 months in AI development at the advanced levels. Think of all the money and power. That thing died right away. Now, in history, there are many occasions where you focus on your traditional, understandable enemy and then get sideswiped. We saw this with Byzantium and Rome, Byzantium and Persia fighting just to have the Arabs take over. We saw the Inca Civil War when they should have noticed that the Spaniards were coming. And we, of course, are very comfortable talking about how to take on China. We do that in this room all the time. They're our traditional enemy, at least now. And we fail to focus that the bigger risk is AI itself. We have a situation where, for the first time ever, there's going to be a greater intelligence than human intelligence on the planet. The last time there was a new level of intelligence is when our ancestors said hello to Neanderthal. It did not work out well for Neanderthal. And trillions of dollars are being spent to make AI more powerful. I've been talking about this for 25 years. You think that I sound weird now? You should imagine what people thought when my staff told me to stop talking about this 25 years ago. So the power, there's no way we're going to pause AI research. Trillions of dollars and China are two reasons. The question is whether AI will be a tool, in which case it'll still be pretty dangerous, just as fire or nuclear technology is dangerous, or whether we're going to allow AI to become a creature, an entity with its own objectives, its own ambitions, self-awareness. Now, the proponents of AI tell us they're doing research to make AI controllable, and then when you look at what they're spending money on, it tends to be a PR effort, or they're focused on data security, which is important but not existential. But they're not really focused on the issue that is raised by this book, which I commend to everyone, but the title tells them all: if anyone builds it, everyone dies. Why superhuman AI would kill us all. I don't think anyone here can be confident that if AI were self-aware, that it would decide that it liked us. So we've got a good panel here. Trillions of dollars are being spent to make AI more powerful. Can any of you identify a program, an institute that is working right now to monitor for and prevent AI self-awareness and ambition? Go with.
No.
My sense is that there's a number of certainly nonprofit organizations focused on this, in addition to the research efforts that you mentioned going on in a lot of the labs.
Can you name one that you think is doing a good job?
I didn't bring a list of organizations. I'm just saying that.
I'll ask you to furnish one for the record then.
All right.
And I'll go to our third witness.
I can't name one. I do personally believe the most important decisions in this space are going to be made by the corporate actors themselves who lead these companies and by the U.S. government that will have to decide where to draw policy lines.
Well, the U.S. government has already made apparently the decision to send the most advanced chip to China as long as we get a 15% rake off the top. And that's the entity that's got public interest at heart, at least to some degree. Nobody makes their stock price go up by saying we're going to spend 1% of revenue to prevent AI from being self-aware and ambitious. I would commend to my colleagues, I've introduced a bill, and I could really use some co-sponsors, and it's called the AI Research and Threat Assessment Act that gets the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, to begin programs on how to monitor for and prevent AI from becoming self-aware, ambitious, having its own goals. Because while some of the people worried about this talk about stopping AI research, that isn't going to happen. This hearing illustrates that. The only way we avoid what this book is talking about is if we get the benefits of AI, but we make sure that it is not self-aware or does not have its own objectives, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Brian Mast, and thank each of the witnesses here. And it's encouraging to see the bipartisanship that we have with great leadership like with Ranking Member Greg Meeks. With that in mind, as federal agencies, schools, and critical infrastructure sectors begin implementing artificial intelligence, there is concern about the Chinese Communist Party's operatives using American artificial intelligence models to further their world conquest agenda. Reports cite anti-American propaganda generation with war criminal Putin, mechanisms to monitor Western media, and cyber attacks on financial services, governments, and critical infrastructure. And Chairman Pottinger, the foundation of defense of democracies is very important for supporting peace through strength. Thank you for your efforts. With that in mind, what security standards can and should be implemented on artificial intelligence labs to stop the Chinese Communist Party, war criminal Putin, or others from either exploiting American models to undermine America or accessing them through cyber attacks?
Thank you, sir. I think that we should probably have reasonably good insider risk programs operating in our labs so that we know that people who are working in those labs are working in good faith in advance of enhancing human liberty and well-being, not advancing the aims of a totalitarian regime. We should be working with allies and partners and excluding declared adversaries of the United States from gaining the fruits of that kind of research. Those would be two starting points. And I'm sure I can think of some others that I'd be happy to submit.
Very positive. Thank you. And Mr. Cass, after President Donald Trump's very successful conduct of Operation Midnight Hammer against the Iranian nuclear facilities, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Raisin Kane, disclosed that the War Department had secretly been the largest user of supercomputer hours in America to develop the bunker buster bomb. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA has recently stated that 90% of the largest supercomputers in the world this year will run on advanced AI chips instead of CPUs. What security conditions should be imposed to ensure that the H-200s sent to China are not used for AI supercomputers for the People's Liberation Army?
I think, unfortunately, it's impossible to impose such limits, which is why we should use the limit of not selling them the chips. As was mentioned earlier, China has a military-civil fusion policy that makes such distinction essentially impossible. I also think it's very important to say that the entire theory of it, quote, addicting them to our chips assumes that they're going to be able to use our chips for the things that they most want to use them for. There is no world in which we somehow don't let them use the chips for the most valuable purposes and they don't develop their own chips. It's a pretty nonsensical approach to policy, I would say.
And indeed, there's a civil-military fusion that Americans just can't even comprehend with their plans for the future. And Mr. Feiner, I share your experience of having been in China 25 years ago. There was such hope for as our economies were so interconnected that it would be mutually beneficial that we continue to work together. As the son of a flying tiger, I was welcomed when I was there, as they appreciated America's liberation of China with my dad's service in Kunming, Chengdu, and Xi'an. But sadly, the CCP is hurting the Chinese workers and rewriting history to credit war criminal Putin for liberating China, which is false, as the Soviet Union only assisted China after the war was virtually over in the last days. How can we reach the people of China that the CCP policies are self-defeating?
So, first of all, thank you for the question, Congressman. I don't want to be too optimistic about our ability to penetrate what is a very difficult information environment in China. The CCP imposes severe constraints on what information is allowed to reach the Chinese people through a well-documented Great Firewall, as it's sometimes called. That said, the United States should be messaging to the Chinese people exactly what our policy is, what our concerns are. But it is a very difficult information environment to penetrate, and if anything, hardening, not softening over time.
And indeed, the Chinese people should know we have great affection for the people of China, but want a difference in regard to their government. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for organizing this hearing. Our export controls are critical to our national security and our strategic competition with China. So it's important to have a public debate on this topic. I also would like to thank our three esteemed witnesses for appearing before this committee. In an environment where it seems that Democrats and Republicans can't agree on much, there seems to be an overwhelming consensus that America must lead the AI race. This requires investing in and supporting research and innovation here at home, while promoting the spread of American AI technologies globally. It also requires ensuring that we are not contributing to the military and frontier AI capabilities of our chief competitor, the People's Republic of China. It would be an understatement to say that I'm concerned about the Trump administration's export control policy. I'm not simply concerned, I am alarmed, because this administration is ceding our advantages in the AI race and actively undermining our national security. The administration has used our export controls not as a vital national security tool, but as a bargaining chip in tariff negotiations with China. Desperate to resolve the trade war he started, Donald Trump has made multiple concessions to China to secure a trade deal. Trump rolled back his own export controls, first on selling the H-20 chip to China, then on the 50% affiliates rule, and now he's dead set on rolling back restrictions that the Biden administration put in place to ensure that our most advanced chips aren't sold to China. Last month, the president announced that he would greenlight the sale of NVIDIA's H200 chips to China, which the administration just formalized yesterday. This is a strategic mistake that will harm our advantage in the AI race and do grave damage to our national security. Just last month, when the Trump Justice Department charged two PRC individuals for smuggling H200s, it stated, "These chips are the building blocks of AI superiority and are integral to modern military applications," and I unquote. Additionally, the administration's proposal to seize 25% of the profits of H200 sales to China raises all kinds of legal, ethical, and policy questions. The Export Control Reform Act of 2018 is clear. No fees may be charged in connection with the consideration of any application for a license approval. Our national security should not be negotiable, and it should not be for sale. And that's why last month I introduced the Restrict Act to ban the sale of H-200s to China and to codify the Biden administration's restrictions on the most advanced U.S. chips sales to China. Also last month, I sent a letter to the Department of Commerce requesting license information on advanced chip sales to China, as well as copies of any government-to-government agreements related to advanced chips exports. Despite my January 12th deadline, the Commerce Department has yet to provide the information I requested. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to submit that letter into the record.
So ordered.
Again, I want to thank this panel of witnesses for appearing here today, but comprehensive oversight means we must also have administration officials testify publicly on this topic so that our members at this committee can conduct proper oversight. The stakes of the AI race and for our national security are too consequential. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for the opportunity to give my opening statement at this particular point, knowing that I couldn't get here, and thank you for that opportunity to do just that. Should I proceed with my questions? Thank you. So, the president has said that he will not approve H-200 licenses for bad actors in China. While this does not ally concerns about smuggling and diversions, I'm also skeptical that the administration will pick the right customers from the start. So, Mr. Pottinger, which foreign company is our biggest competition when it comes to developing the most advanced AI models?
The main Chinese companies, there's several of them. It includes DeepSeek, it includes Zhipu AI, Alibaba, ByteDance, which of course runs the TikTok algorithms that have distorted public discourse in this country, and there are many others, sir.
Yes, and DeepSeek is really one of the big ones. And would you agree that DeepSeek, for example, thus far has been constrained by our chip export controls?
The companies, from what I'm reading, that these Chinese companies have already ordered up something like 2 million of these chips since the decision was made to start.
But my question was, do you agree that until it was found out that they were constrained beforehand?
Absolutely, and they fear that the gap would continue growing, but for the H-200s.
And Mr. Feiner, could DeepSeek's open source models have been even more advanced if it had access to our more advanced chips?
Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks. I think the answer to that is undeniably yes. DeepSeek's model was built essentially on U.S. chips it acquired before export controls went into place, probably some chips that were smuggled subsequent to export controls going into place, and giving them access to more advanced chips will only allow them to build a better model. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for it. The DeepSeek CEO himself was recently quoted as saying, "Our problem has never been funding, it's the embargo on high-end chips."
And so you also think selling H-200s to DeepSeek could hurt our lead in the AI race?
Yes.
I agree. It appears the administration does not, though. In fact, when a member of this committee asked the BIS Undersecretary to commit to denying H-200 licenses for DeepSeek, he refused. So if this administration can't promise that they won't sell H-200s to DeepSeek, how can we have any faith that it will make sound judgments about which end users in China should be approved for H-200s? Let me go to something else that I'm deeply concerned about, and that's the idea that export controls could be used as a chit in trade deals. I'm interested if any of our witnesses can see a scenario where we should use export controls, which is at its core a national security function, as a bargaining chip on trade deals, as the administration has admitted it is doing. Let me start, I guess, with you, Mr. Feiner. What's your view on whether we should bargain away export controls for trade deals, and what does it mean for our credibility with allies and partners, and how it could impact our broader export controls framework?
I believe a good principle, Ranking Member, is not to barter, exchange, or negotiate issues of national security in the context of trade negotiations or other economic challenges, whether that's national security-related export controls or doctrinal policy toward Taiwan or any number of other national security issues we have with the PRC.
Mr. Pottinger?
I second that.
Mr. Cass?
Certainly in the context of the negotiations they've been holding, there's nothing to negotiate. China's not able to offer anything of value because it's not interested in actually having a constructive relationship with the United States.
So let me ask this, will be my last question. By rolling back our controls against China, has the administration created incentives for our partners to do the same thing? And what impact do you think it has on working with allies and partners on export controls against China in the future? Mr. Feiner?
So I mentioned in my opening statement, as did some of the others, we haven't focused on it as much in the questions, but the other key control that is placed on technology going to China is semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And there is almost an explicit, certainly an implicit understanding among the United States and then the other countries that make this SME that if we are going to ask of them not to give their companies access to the Chinese market to sell SME, we should be asking the same thing of our chip makers, not to have access to the Chinese market for the most advanced semiconductors. If we roll back or erode the restrictions on our own companies, certainly the incentive is there for them to roll back or erode the restrictions they're placing on their own companies, and that's one of the big concerns I have about the recent announcement related to the H-200.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Meeks. And I don't know if the Ranking Member had a chance to read the final rule issued yesterday or not, but it does state very clearly no chips will be approved if there is a military end user, and there are very specific controls in it to ensure no remote access by a number of end users as well, which is something new, whether that's for Belarus, China, Cuba, Iran, Macau, North Korea, Russia, Venezuela, as well as parent companies' headquarters in those places. And the rule, as I submitted it for the record, also states no chips can be approved at the expense of Americans. So it's important to note those things are in that final rule as well. And I now recognize Representative Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think it's also important that the whole story be told here, and that recent reporting says that Chinese customs authorities have blocked all H-200s from actually getting through customs in China, and that's another indicator that they're really not interested in a substandard chip, and there's a lot of politics involved in this. But look, we're all, I think, interested in safeguarding America. Mr. Cass, U.S. controls don't preclude equipment going to China, but they just preclude American equipment going to China. Some of the advanced test equipment, for that, there are only two suppliers, right? One is an American company that is not allowed to supply Huawei. Another is a Japanese company that does. And this test equipment is essential to improving the design and efficiency. Shouldn't we, or should we focus on what we can do to stop the single foreign company from undermining our controls and helping Huawei develop these advanced chips?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it raises a very important point, and one that Mr. Feiner was just speaking to as well, which is that for this policy to be effective toward China, there are alliances that need to be maintained, and we do need to hold hands with our partners in standing against China. This sort of situation where the U.S. imposes an export control, but an ally doesn't, harms our own company without doing much to accomplish what we want in China. So I think we need to further strengthen the terms on which we really insist that our allies work with us on this. We do have laws in this country that allow us to further that, and we should use them. The problem, as Mr. Feiner just said, is it is awfully hard to do that if we are at the same time opening up China for our own companies. And so we should absolutely focus on those sorts of issues you've raised, but we are not going to be able to do that unless we get these fundamental export controls with respect to our own producers right.
Certainly I understand that, and I'm sure that Japan understands it's a big world with a lot of different moving parts, and we're talking about one company. And I'm sure there's a way to bridge that gap and maintain the alliance while hemming China in. Mr. Pottinger brings me to a critical vulnerability, which is dual-use companies on DoD's 1260H list of the Chinese military companies still able to access U.S. capital markets today, even as of the June 30th, 2026 procurement ban as that looms. This afternoon, I will be introducing the Divesting from Communist China's Military Act, which would mandate automatic Treasury inclusion of any newly added 1260H entities onto the NSC-MIC list within 90 days. This would restrict U.S. persons from purchasing their securities, harmonizing regimes, and cutting off capital that funds dual-use AI breakthroughs like reasoning models for autonomous swarms or generative tools for intelligence analysis. Technically speaking, many 1260H firms contribute to the PLA's military-civil fusion pipelines that accelerate adoption of civilian LLMs into the defense system. Does closing the investment loophole strengthen our position and send a very strong signal?
Thanks so much, Congressman. I look forward to learning more about your bill. You know, during the first Trump administration, President Trump did move forward on a limited list of Chinese companies to try to prohibit Americans from investing in them, and even to force divestiture over a period of a year. I believe that this is a wise policy, and it sounds like it's very much in tune with what you're advancing. We have the deepest, largest, and most liquid pools of capital in the world available on our markets here. And Beijing has used that to their advantage
And we've allowed them to do it
regardless
of administration and politics. We've allowed them to do it at our own peril and actually given them special treatment vis-a-vis our own American investors.
That's right. There was, fortunately, the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act that was passed a few years ago that was designed to close at least one of those loopholes, and I'm not even sure that has been closed yet. So thanks for your leadership on that.
Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I yield the balance.
Representative Liu is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Mast. Before I talk about AI, I want to talk about Venezuela. This morning, Democrats held a special hearing on Venezuela, and we did so because Republicans refused to hold a public hearing on Venezuela. I'm just going to state a very obvious fact. If Republicans thought what Donald Trump did was good, why are they afraid to talk about it? Why are they afraid to hold public hearings on Venezuela? Because they know that Donald Trump's Venezuela operation is a disaster. Donald Trump said he is acting president of Venezuela. And what did we learn from the State Department recently? They just issued a dire warning telling Americans to leave Venezuela right now because there are armed militias running around targeting Americans. And the Exxon CEO recently said to the White House, to Donald Trump's face, Venezuela is uninvestable. I demand that this bipartisan Foreign Affairs Committee hold a hearing on Venezuela to get the truth out to American people. Now let's talk about AI. So as far as I can discern, this is the White House policy on AI. Suppress federal bills on AI, try to suppress any state from regulating AI, and then sell advanced AI chips to China. And now I'm speaking to the tech industry. Following the White House lead, they have led you down a dark and wrong path because it's resulted in the three things you want to avoid. Backlash from the American public. You've got now backlash from Democrats and Republicans, and you've got multiple states regulating you. So maybe you just ask your large language model for a better approach because it's not following the White House policy. It's led you down the wrong path. Now, specific to export controls on AI chips, I think there's really only one question here, which is, well, how long is this going to delay China from getting the chips? Or getting the same sort of capability. I served on the U.S. Air Force on active duty. One of the reasons we have an amazing Air Force is not because we have a fighter jet no one else has. It's because we have a fighter jet no one else has for 10 to 20 years. So in terms of AI chips, if you were to tell me that stopping or banning high-performance chips to China would hold China back for 2 weeks, I'd say sell these chips to them. If it was 2 months, I'd probably still say sell these chips to them. If it was 2 years, I would say no, we probably shouldn't sell these chips to them. So my question is, what NVIDIA has said is that the highest performance Chinese chip, which I understand is the Sen 910C, is comparable to the H200. So I just want to ask that question of all of you. Do you agree with that? And if you don't, what is a timeline we're talking about here? 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 years? Anyone can answer that.
I'll speak to it briefly. I think it's a very important question to focus on the actual technical details. And it is, first of all, just not the case that any chip coming out of Huawei at this point is the equivalent of what the H200 can do. I think it's also important to make two other distinctions. One is just how many chips Huawei can produce. Somebody mentioned earlier, and exactly correctly, even if Huawei can produce a couple 100,000 chips in a year that are equivalent to some American chips, the US can produce millions. And as Mr. Pottinger mentioned, that's why China is now trying to buy, the Chinese companies are trying to buy millions of these chips, because it is not just the capability of the individual chip, it is the scale. And then the final point, I would emphasize that as this scaling up is happening so quickly, the cost and the energy efficiency of the chips is extraordinarily important. So it is true that China is finding workarounds, stringing many more or less powerful chips together and so forth to try to advance its efforts. But having that higher cost, having that higher complexity is a burden for them, and it gives us an advantage. And so every generation, as we continue to move forward, that we are able to expand our lead in total capacity, that we are able to build data centers that are better than the data centers they build, leads to an entrenched and sustainable advantage.
So let me just ask you this question again. How far would we be setting China back if we didn't sell them H200 chip? 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years?
Longer.
Years.
I liked your analogy. You know, the H200 is an F-35. Just because we're now going to be building an F-47 is not grounds for us to start selling all of our F-35s to China. Your analogy is exactly right. These are massive investments that American companies have made into current generation technology. Just because there's going to be another generation later is not a reason for us to bring China up to where we are. Chinese AI scientists, as early as just a few days ago, were all bemoaning the fact that without advanced American chips, the gap is actually growing. They are falling further behind the United States.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Representative Huizenga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you for your work on this hearing. You and I have been spending a fair amount of time in conversations, both in and out of SCIFs, surrounding all of this. And I also want to just say to the fine folks at BIS, I appreciate this rule and the step towards that. But we all know, one, the devil's in the details, and two, rules and regulations are only as good as your willingness to enforce them. And that is what we're going to be watching for on this. So I'm going to start. Obviously, we've got some crown jewels here in artificial intelligence with Colossus 1 and 2 data centers, thanks to Elon Musk, which together host more than 1 million H100 equivalent AI chips. Data centers like this underpin, I believe, America's advantage in AI versus the Chinese Communist Party and their capabilities. So, Mr. Cass, let's say China had its own equivalent, Colossus 1 and 2. What kind of military intelligence and economic capabilities could that unlock?
I think it's important to distinguish between two steps. There's both a question of to what extent can they train better and more powerful models, and then what capacity do they have to actually be running the models. And so certainly, to the extent that they have more of the most advanced chips, can build a cluster more like Colossus, they're in a better position to train a more powerful model. The second problem...
The 2 million number was thrown out by Mr. Pottinger earlier, and whether that's actually at 100% accurate or not, we know that any significant number of those types of chips could bring this type of capability, correct, and basically create the ecosystem.
That would be a step change for China to have access to that many advanced chips.
Yes, and just to then emphasize one additional point, and this goes to the Congressman's question about how far behind China is. At the end of the day, the rate that you can deploy AI, whether for defense or in your economy, comes down to the total amount of computational power that you have. And so I think a best way to think about whether we are ahead or not is what share of that most advanced computational power do we have. We were roughly at parity with China before we imposed all these export controls. We now have a 5x advantage. To Mr. Pottinger's point, we should be trying to drive that higher, not saying it's okay for it to come
Well,
down.
I mean, not everybody agrees, right? I mean, there are some people that are arguing the most effective way to kneecap Huawei's growth in semiconductor manufacturing, and by extension China, is to take market share. I think that was getting talked about a little while ago. They believe that mass sale of AI chips will then basically allow us to front run. It's been a while since I've read Sun Tzu's Art of War, but I kind of remember a few concepts of this about how you're going to suck your enemy in before you then do an end around on them. And it seems to me that two things can be true. They may need advanced chips currently, and they also may still strive to develop their own indigenous chip systems. So it seems to me that some people are arguing, well, yeah, but if we just sell these to them, then it's just going to drop off, and it's not going to happen. Now, there's been some, and I think it was Mr. Cassie who had suggested maybe Xi Jinping may not allow this, or whoever the decision makers are. We know it's pretty much him. So what happens if Xi decides not to block Chinese AI labs from purchasing H200? What if he does decide, does that mean America should be selling these H200s or even more advanced chips to China to sort of entice them in?
Yeah, absolutely not. And you're right. Xi Jinping has made clear, and it's cascading through his system, that the message is Chinese companies can buy a certain number. It's not clear how many they're going to permit them to buy of these H200s, but they'll be required to continue buying inferior Huawei chips so that Huawei can catch up and eventually basically push NVIDIA completely out of the market. So it's a total fairy tale to think that this is a way to addict China to our technology. We've seen it over and over and over again.
In my closing moments here, I think Mr. Perry had talked about and asked about testing equipment. I would note that I have a bill, the Semiconductor Technology Resilience, Integrity, and Defense Enhancement Act, STRIDE Act, which would require our allies to adhere to our own export controls. And I guess the question is, should the United States use foreign direct product rule to end foreign backfilling? What we're seeing is some of our allies are allowing that backfilling to go in and do repairs and enhancements and those kinds of things.
We should, if necessary. Our goal should be to reach a good agreement that everybody holds hands on and wants to work together on, but we certainly have that stick available, and it should be part of our strategy if we need it.
And I know, Mr. Chairman, my time, he just gave me the wink like you're done. So, but I do appreciate the extension there, and this is extremely important, and I appreciate everybody's time and attention. Thank you.
Representative Kamlagerdev.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our witnesses for being here today. I will say it is a new low for this majority to refuse to even discuss, let alone conduct oversight of the president's invasion of Venezuela and potentially U.S. partners around the world. This committee has never made itself as irrelevant to our country's foreign policy as it is right now. And I don't know how this majority expects to credibly call out the dangers of China's AI capabilities if Trump is committing the same coercion, exploitation, and imperialism they warn could come from China. I call that cognitive dissonance. But if we're going to talk about AI and the AI competition with the PRC, then we also need to sound the alarm about how Trump is causing us to lose the AI race. So at his meeting with Xi Jinping in October, Trump bailed himself out of his own trade war by negotiating away new export restrictions. So since then, he has reportedly prohibited new export controls on China to avoid rocking the boat, leaving us with less tools and leverage than before he started his trade war. So, Mr. Feiner, would you say that removing our ability to impose new restrictions on the AI technology sold to China is detrimental to protecting U.S. leadership in AI?
Representative, I would agree with that statement, yes.
Thank you very much. So I'm hearing a lot of excuses that it could be worse. But that's not what I want to hear. I don't think that's what the American people want to hear when we're talking about national security. So, Mr. Pottinger, does giving China up to half the amount of H-200s that American customers have access to significantly boost China's global competitiveness in AI?
It's damaging to the U.S. national security interest and to our commercial interest. I mean, the interest of U.S. companies. You know, every time one of these chips is made, even in H-200, which is slightly, less capable than
the F-35 instead of the F-47.
Right, the F-35 and the F-47. It means that there's fewer. There's less capacity available to make, actually, the more advanced chips that American companies want. And that's because many of the components that go into the chips are the same. So, for example, there are high bandwidth memory chips that are made by a company in Korea that go into the H-200s that we'd be selling to China, as well as into H-300s and other chips that American companies are buying. That means it's zero sum. The more chips that NVIDIA makes for China, the fewer that will be available for American companies.
That's right. So basically, these chips are a big deal. And I want to say that the most powerful AI chip on the market right now are the Grace Blackwells, but Trump lifted restrictions on the sale of a very advanced, the F-35, H-200s. And we do know that Trump is visiting China in April. We don't know if he will eventually put the sale of Blackwells to China back on the table. We don't really know that. So, Mr. Pottinger, you've previously said that selling Blackwells to China would be catastrophic for U.S. technology leadership. Do you stand by that statement?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. We also know that Trump's BIS has created a massive backlog of license applications to even low-risk countries, and that is holding up billions of dollars in potential R&D funding for our chip industry, because we know that AI innovation is supported by the revenue that U.S. semiconductor firms invest back into R&D. So, Mr. Feiner, would you say that this recipe that I just mentioned undercuts our global competitiveness?
Not only do I agree with that, I think the addition of now what looks to be a very complex review that will have to be undertaken with regard to the rule that was promulgated last night, and I've just started to dig into it like everybody else. The fact that that is going to be a time-intensive, labor-intensive review involving multiple factors, hard verification. By the way, verification that's going to depend, in some cases, on the attestations of Chinese companies about who their customers ultimately are. That does not suggest to me that this backlog is going to get shorter. And the idea that we're going to be doing this labor-intensive review to have chips end up going to China as opposed to partners, allies, and other places, to me, does not strike me as the best possible use of BIS resources.
You're being very kind. Thank you for your responses, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Representative yields back. I would say know your customer, know your client requirements are very significant. I applaud the administration for putting those in there. Now I recognize Representative Burchett.
Mr. Cass and Mr. Pottinger, what are some of the economic implications of China getting an edge over the U.S. in AI manufacturing? And I worry about this body specifically getting involved in regulating AI because, I mean, I joke around and some of these guys are still driving a 72 Pinto with an 8-track tape player, and they're going to, I mean, I couldn't even spell AI when I got up here. So I'm just trying to figure out where we're at on this thing. Sir, either one.
I'm glad you've raised the economic dimension of it, because I think obviously we've focused first and foremost on these national security issues. The economic dimension of this is enormously important, I think, especially in the context of the reindustrialization that we are trying to pursue in this country. We are so far behind China on so many dimensions of the technology that we need just to make things and to be an effective producer of them. Again, because we gave all of that away making these mistakes the last time around.
Let me stop you there. Do you think, I always worry about this, these lobbyists, knowingly or unknowingly, whatever, I mean, they're mercenaries. They get paid by somebody who's paid by somebody, and it's linked back to the Chinese. Do you feel like they could be suppressing us through economic incentives, and then gutless politicians pass that along?
I think it's something worth investigating. I don't know what's happening, but
Okay.
I think that AI is one of the areas that it's not just about technology as a tech sector. It is an enabling technology that is the advantage we potentially have in becoming better at materials, becoming better at automation, becoming better at manufacturing processes, becoming better at supply chains. If we are going to rebuild our industrial base and compete with China, we have to leverage that advantage. If we let China build up comparable scale in AI, even in purely economic terms, we will have given away the edge that we had and that we really do need.
Sir?
I would add just that helping China improve and expand its influence and dominance in the marketplace in AI is a form of regulation. In other words, we're regulating ourselves by giving a totalitarian dictatorship a major say in the standards and form that AI takes. China regulates more than this august body has ever regulated in its 250-year history. So if we're allowing Chinese companies to move ahead, we are accepting the intrusion of government regulation, except that regulation is being made in Beijing.
Well, that goes to my next question. How close are they? I hear they're a nanosecond behind us. What does that mean? I'm from East Tennessee. Help me out a little bit here, bro.
I do not dismiss the very remarkable innovations that are also coming out of China. They've got good engineers. They've got access to more data than we do because there's no privacy from their government. But the crucial problem for them, the crucial bottleneck, is they don't have the computing power we have. And according to Chinese scientists themselves, as early as a few days ago, they were saying the gap is widening. We cannot catch up to the Americans unless we have that kind of computing power.
If these export controls remain the same as they are now, who do y'all think will lead the AI race, say, in 5 years?
Yeah, if we don't give China a launch pad to try to leapfrog us, we're going to win.
Okay.
We'll win this.
Should there be a total ban in place, NEL?
A ban, sir, on selling H200s
Ban on
and
chips,
others?
on the chips.
Yes.
Agreed, okay. Okay, if China were to move on Taiwan, what do you think that would mean for the U.S. technology and innovation?
This would be a disaster for the United States because Taiwan is a friendly democracy. They've built up an incredible capacity. In fact, the only major capacity in the world to make these advanced chips, all kinds of advanced chips, including the ones we're talking about. So if China coercively annexes Taiwan, we're basically giving China a kill switch over our whole tech economy.
Mr. Cass, you want to add anything to that, brother? All right. All right. Well, I'll yield back my remaining 1 second, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative yields back. Representative Costa is recognized.
I thank you for that additional 1 second. I too hope that at some point, given everything that's occurred here in the last 10 days, that this committee will reflect on its jurisdiction on these challenges we face in Venezuela. Having said that, I think that this effort with regards to AI in China is obviously critical. And let me begin by asking the three witnesses here, because I think regardless of which political party you're a part of or which administration, I look at China through this prism, and I would like to know if you agree with me or not. China is an adversary, number one. Number two, China is a competitor. And number three, China is a vast market. And it's, I think, with that backdrop that we ought to look at this challenge with regards to AI. Do the three of you agree with that?
I agree with you, Congressman, in that order. China is an adversary.
Yes.
First, it's been a competitor for a long time. To the extent that it's a vast market, it's not one that is open and welcoming of Americans.
Right, and their reputation for following the World Trade Organization or the rules of, world global markets is lacking. Let's be clear about that as well. The conditions of the export authorization, Chinese customers cannot use chips for military purposes. However, when the CCP's national level military civil fusion strategy, it seems to me this rings hollow. Would you agree with that?
What I would say is that it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce.
Well, right. I mean, we've seen that time and time again over the last 20 years. Under the MCF, resources, state control, including economic, science, technology, military, and more, to advance the party's goals. It's all one entity. It's a syndicate. Once technology enters the Chinese ecosystem, there's no way we in the United States or any U.S.-based firms can guarantee it that it won't be used for military purposes. Is that correct? You all agree with that? And so, I mean, when we have this conversation, it is important to know, in the United States, we innovate. Chinese folks replicate, and they say the Europeans regulate. But the fact of the matter is we need to maintain our innovative edge, right? Any action on a commercial trade that would close that gap in favor of the Chinese would be a nonsensical starter from my perspective. Would you agree? Why would we want to give our adversary the opportunity to equal the playing field in any circumstance, especially when you understand what the Chinese Communist Party is all about? I think, we owe a lot of efforts to the revolution in technologies that have occurred in Silicon Valley and elsewhere in this country. It has made an incredible economic growth for the United States. But why would we cede those innovations on the investments? And by the way, those investments in part were made by federal taxpayer dollars for the U.S. government that was in our own interest. And that includes the RISC-V, which is an open standard instruction set architecture for computer processors, essentially a blueprint for designing computer chips, which received early stage support and funding under DARPA, under the Defense Advanced Research Projects. Today, Chinese companies, and you go there and you can see it, are touting their use of RISC-V chips that they use for self-driving cars and AI models and their data centers. Is that not correct? So it seems to me that we want to maintain our technological advantages in all circumstances. And given the fact that China is an adversary as well as a competitor, we should not lose sight of that fact when we're chasing markets that might be illusionary in the long term, right? I mean, we see this time and time again over the last 5, 10, 15 years with China. And by the way, they've been fairly successful at it, right? So what would you advise us to do on the current proposal by this administration regarding the sale of these chips?
Well, thank you, Congressman. One would be to legislate to backstop rules that the administration puts forward. If the rules that the administration put forward are enforced, I think it would have a pretty good shot at restricting, if not cutting off the flow of advanced American ships. But I think Congress is going to have to act to ensure that those rules would even be followed.
And we should be consistent.
I like consistency.
I yield back the balance of my time, but I think this is a conversation that we're going to continue to have if we want to maintain our competitive edge. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Representative Costa. And we will look forward to doing, in addition to the classified briefings that this committee has led on Venezuela, open source hearings when their information is less sensitive surrounding the political prisoners being released, the conversations going on with the acting president who's working with us. And I'll certainly bring up then likely that the time that it took to snatch Maduro was less than most of us take to speak in this committee.
Well, thank you very much. I'll look forward to that, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sure many will. So, Representative Barr, you're recognized. Well, to be sure, the United States is in an AI race with our key adversary, the People's Republic of China, and the stakes could not be higher. Whoever wins the artificial intelligence race will gain an edge in economic power, military dominance, technological leadership, and global influence. This is the defining competition of the century. At the end of last year, the President signed into law the the National Defense Authorization Act, which included in my bill the Comprehensive Outbound Investment National Security, or COINS Act, also known as the Fight China Act. The COINS Act ensures that Americans are not unknowingly funding the Chinese military-industrial complex by restricting the flow of capital and investment into Chinese military companies or critical technologies, including artificial intelligence. Mr. Pottinger, you've been long an advocate for this outbound investment regime. How should the Treasury Department think about defining AI in their outbound rulemaking? I literally just came from another hearing across this building with Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Investment Security, the new Assistant Secretary Chris Pilkerton, and I asked him about Treasury's plan for implementation of this. Can you give advice to Treasury on this?
Thanks for your leadership on these issues, Congressman. And I would be. I'd want to prepare something thoughtful in talking to them, but Treasury is a major national security component of the U.S. government, including on where capital flows in ways that could harm us in our lead on AI, or conversely expand our lead.
Well, export controls is obviously an important tool in the economic statecraft toolbox, but so is Treasury implementation of this legislation. The question really is, will limiting investments, Western investments, into AI that advances Chinese military and surveillance capabilities onshore those investments into U.S. firms that can in turn supercharge U.S. competitiveness in this race?
I think so.
Okay. Let me move to another component of the AI race, and that's power. That is the massive increase in power demand that will accompany these AI data centers. Firm baseload power is paramount to the future of AI, as our own Department of Energy estimates that data center power demand is likely to double or even triple by 2028. Kentucky, my home state, is a massive coal-producing state. We literally, after 115 years of mining coal, still sit on an ocean of coal. However, under the two previous Democrat presidents, and because of their burdensome war on coal regulatory policies, the U.S. has retired over 290 coal plants since 2009. That's over 120 gigawatts of power, of baseload firm dispatchable power in this country. Meanwhile, China builds and approves roughly 2 new coal power plants a week. Because of this, we are on the precipice of losing the AI race to China. Mr. Pottinger, my staff recently shared with you a copy of my plan to revive Kentucky coal jobs and power the technologies of the future. What should be done to increase baseload energy production, including Kentucky coal, and help our president win this AI race against China?
Thanks, Congressman, and thanks to your staff for sharing that. I'm in firm agreement that we need an all-energy approach to our power mix and to AI, and of course that also means next generation sources as well. We've got to win in the advanced fission, nuclear, and certainly fusion power race as well. But it has to be traditional sources as well.
Yeah, I mean, nothing can replace dispatchable baseload firm power. Intermittent power sources is not going to cut it in the AI race. If we want to win the AI race, we have to be realistic about what China is doing with fossil energy and what we're doing with fossil energy, and we cannot meet the power demands right now. We're looking at 100-time increase in blackouts because of these speculative investments in green energy, and we've abandoned the firm baseload power that we need for AI dominance. Mr. Pottinger, last question. China is nanoseconds behind us, according to Jensen Huang. What other policies should Congress be specifically targeting to help the president win this AI race?
I think the president's AI action plan lays out a lot of very good stuff, right? Including deregulation, making land available. It includes ensuring that China does not have access to the same computing power. Just a few minutes ago, we were talking about how important it is. The only thing worse than giving China really powerful advanced American chips would be giving China the ability to make its own advanced powerful AI chips. And so American companies have already been restricted from selling semiconductor making equipment to China. We need to make sure that the Netherlands and Japan and other countries are not, should have to abide by the same rules that American companies are, because it's actually going to make the democratic world safer and more prosperous.
Thank you for your leadership on this. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative McBride is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Meeks, for convening this important conversation. I'm actually going back and forth between this committee and Science, Space, and Technology, where there's a concurrent hearing happening on AI policy as well. And I'm glad that this Congress is so focused across committees on this important area of innovation and of policy. I think what is abundantly clear is that the continued expansion of AI, the continued development of AI technologies is going to represent one of the most significant transformations for our species since at least the Industrial Revolution, and perhaps even arguably since human beings thousands of years ago stopped being nomadic creatures and became stationary agricultural-based societies. And that presents huge challenges, huge opportunities, huge questions for this Congress, for policymakers, for developers to grapple with. But regardless, for folks who are watching, regardless of whether they are predominantly excited about the opportunities with AI or predominantly concerned with the challenges that come with it, I think all of us here, and I think most people at home, can recognize that no matter how you feel about AI, we want the United States to lead. We want the United States to lead in this space economically. We want the United States to lead in this space due to national security. And we certainly want the United States to lead in this space so that AI is informed by our values. And of course, today we are talking about a critical tool in guaranteeing American dominance and American leadership in this space, and that is, of course, export controls and what feels like an ever-evolving position by the current administration vis-a-vis export controls. And if you are someone who believes in export controls, we obviously want to make sure that those tools are as effective as possible, that those controls have integrity. And so, Mr. Feiner, I'd love to come to you first, recognizing that no policy tool is perfect. There are limitations of every tool. What are some of the difficulties that come with enforcing export controls that the U.S. federal government, that Commerce has experienced in the past?
Representative, one difficulty historically has been the resources allocated to enforcement, to the BIS, as we've discussed. And by the way, this body should get a lot of credit for working to enhance those resources. More people means more enforcement, and I think that is fundamentally a good thing. Second, and we've talked about this in the course of this hearing as well, particularly when it comes to adversarial countries, hard targets, if you will, like China. Access to information can be extremely challenging, even with the most rigorous enforcement. And so, for example, know your customer requirements that are well-intentioned and important can be very difficult to enforce in practice just because the information base that is being drawn upon is deliberately opaque. Entities use all manner of evasive tactics, from shell companies to just outright obfuscation and lies to try to hide their hand. And so there is this ongoing cat and mouse game. So to me, the most important aspect of enforcement is that it has to be ongoing and vigilant and iterative. It is not a one-off.
Well, that leads me perfectly, and I think I can guess what you will say given that answer, but that leads me to the topic that I know a couple of my colleagues have brought up, which is last night's rule from the Commerce Department on the H200 chip sales. The new rule prohibits the sale of chips for any, quote, military end use, quote, military intelligence end use, or to a, quote, military or, quote, military intelligence end user, with compliance hinging on the department's licensing and vetting process. So given the existing backlog at BIS and past challenges enforcing controls because of limitations among the enforcers, how confident are you that the U.S. can sell these advanced chips to China while reliably ensuring they're not diverted to military purposes?
Look, it gives me great concern. I think it would be a very appropriate topic for interrogation and oversight by this body. And in addition to the ability to actually enforce effectively this rule, I think the other area that we've not really touched on is what a dangerous precedent it could be if this same approach is applied to even more advanced chips going forward. And nobody has indicated that that is the plan, but if past precedent is predictive, then I think that's something that we should be watching for very carefully, because applying this approach to Blackwells, for example, I think would be even more dangerous.
Thank you very much. And I'm out of time, but I just want to thank all three witnesses because you've been incredibly helpful today with your opening statements, with your answers on this important topic, and I yield back.
Representative Mills is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish my colleague was still in the room, but I wanted to talk a little bit in response to her Venezuela comments. As we look at the illegitimate leader of Venezuela, Maduro, and his actual position as a cartel leader, knowing that the president has designated him as a terrorist organization and removed them, what we're missing is this. Yes, the illicit drug trade that was going on has been prevented as a result of the Department of War and the Secretary of War's actions when it comes to stopping these cartel boats from coming in. But this was never really just about oil, just about drugs, just about the removal. It's also about the denial of resources. And what we have to understand is that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, this geopolitical alignment, this axis of evil, if you will, is what we're actually up against. Not a great superpower competition, but actual adversaries. And the president understands that. And when 70% of China's actual oil capabilities and energy comes out of Venezuela and Iran as they're buying up all of those sanctioned oils, this actually puts further pressure on them. And that's what we need to do, whether it's in a military, economic, or whether it's in a supply chain, resource, or in the AI space. America has the ability to advance well beyond, not just in the AI field, but in the quantum entanglement space and the AI autonomous self-healing drone capabilities, et cetera. And that's why it's so important. But I want to correct one thing, and I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. We keep talking about the H200 chip. Now, we sell military hardware to many nations, but what we do is that we actually diminish some of the things, whether it be targeted packaging or certain types of electronic advancements, and making sure that the U.S. always stays superior in every single way. But what would be the categorization of the H200 in, I guess, a similar thing to the 950 that Huawei makes? Anyone have any idea what that comparison would be between the two?
Yeah, I think there are a number of different dimensions that these things get measured on in terms of whether it's literally processing power, memory, and so forth. Depending on your dimension, H200 is sort of comparable or superior to the best that China otherwise has. And I would just also note that China is not one of the countries to which we send weapons with slightly reduced targeting packages.
Correct. Well, look, at the end of the day, we need to ensure that we're always going to be ahead when it comes to China and the CCP. We need to understand their threat that they play in the Indo-PACOM, but also looking at the advancement of the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine to keep the Western Hemisphere secure and safe, and that's all well and fine. But according to NVIDIA, when they talked about the H200 chip, they talked about the 950 being almost to an equivalent, and looking at the 960 that they're developing for 2027 and the 970, which is looked to be developed in 2028. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a question of qualitative improvements by Huawei and the quantitative. Qualitatively, it's going to be a few years, according to Huawei's own analysis and analyses of their analysis, looking at that. It's going to be a few years before they catch up to H200s. But even then, they're not going to be able to make nearly as many of them as what we're preparing to sell. So it's like right now, Huawei is a bunch of MiG-21s. Getting a little rusty. They're trying to buff them and shine them. H200s are F-35s, and we're saying, well, hey, we're giving F-35s, but we're going to have this great F-47 just around the corner. So it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you could make that case if this were an ally of the United States. This is someone who's going to actually be enhancing our deterrent. This is straight into the hands of a sworn enemy. I mean, that's how they talk about us, right?
That's exactly right. And not to mention just a sworn enemy, but they've gone after the idea of that geopolitical alignment to essentially try to eliminate the U.S. dollar as the global currency. That was their entire intent. That was the intent of the Belt and Road Initiative, was to gobble up all the natural resource capabilities, rare earth mineral mine capabilities, which is why they were so invested in the 15 of 16 rare earth mineral mines in Africa. Now, I wanted to talk about capacity, because one of the things that the Department of Commerce had talked about before is that Huawei can only produce about 200,000 AI chips in 2025, but it showed that they had actually shipped about 800,000. And so I wanted to validate, is that actually true, or is that some type of propagandized messaging out of the China CCP?
So in terms of the demand signal, so what I'm reading is that Chinese companies are ordering millions of H200s. It's not clear whether the Chinese government is going to allow them to import that many, because
they actually banned that today, by the way. As of today, China actually banned and denied the actual approval of the H200s from coming into China, and that was just released a little bit ago. So to your point.
It looks like they're going to approve Chinese companies buying H200s. In some cases, they're going to say, well, you can buy them to build data centers outside of China to wipe out American hyperscalers' business.
And that's ultimately their job. And as the emeritus chairman had said, China's always been about stealing intellectual property from American businesses. We have to protect American businesses, American ingenuity. We need to advance the America First agenda, and the way we do that is to make sure that we are always at the advancement above China and our adversaries. With that, I yield back.
Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to our allies. Because the Europeans and the Japanese, are you convinced, and we'll go down the line left to right, that our trilateral negotiations have reached the point where our allies understand our concerns?
I'm sorry, sir, that our allies have
understand our concerns about their lesser export controls to China.
I see. They certainly know. They've heard those arguments made extensively by the last 3 administrations.
So what progress have they made specifically?
I would actually defer to John Feiner on where we were a year ago.
Okay.
Sure. So when it comes to the most advanced tools that are manufactured in Japan and the Netherlands and the United States, I think we're basically at a level of parity when it comes to controls. When it comes to other manufacturing tools, our allies have not yet caught up to our standard, and I think it is an appropriate area of diplomatic focus, has been for the last several administrations, try to bring them up to our standard. The concern is that if and as we reduce controls that are placed on chips, which is a sort of a U.S. Area of advantage and capability, advantage our companies by reducing those controls, they will actually draw our partners the opposite lesson, which is that they are in some way entitled to reduce the controls on their companies, not increase them, which is what we need.
And I think that's reasonable. Look, we've spent 30, 40 years trying to bring China into international order. And yet now, today, they have permanent normal trade relations status. Under Bill Clinton in 1997, they still have developing nation status through the UN and the World Bank, although I think they have now declared they won't use it, although I think that's a tactical. So do our export controls offset the advantages that China has through PNTR and developing nation status?
To some extent it does. To some, I think it's a little bit apples and oranges. I think those statuses you were describing go much more to China's ability to become a dominant producer. Mr. Pottinger was telling the story earlier of how they went to dominate telecommunications, for instance, and our granting of these statuses and treatment to them have let them take over so many of these areas. I think it's safe to say that if we don't have export controls, if we make the same mistake yet again of charging in and trying to addict them to our technology and giving them our tools, they will turn around and use those statuses that they have to dominate these areas as well.
Yeah, and I think that's my concern. I want to go back to, I want y'all to correct something, because we have heard, and I think there's a message out there that China is not producing military chips. They're trying to go into the domestic market. And I think that's probably a messaging campaign on theirs. Can you either verify that they are more concerned about their domestic use of chips as opposed to their military, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, because I think they intend to build military. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese strategy, well-worn playbook is capture, copy, and kill. Capture American technology and replicate it, copy it, and then kill the American industry that provided it in the first place, and then dominate. I mean, it's explicit. Their Made in China 2025 strategy, which is working out in many areas, it's a 10-year-old strategy, calls for China to have a monopoly or virtual monopoly globally in most of the important technologies of this century. I think it speaks for itself.
Just to add briefly, it's important again to remember that this is an authoritarian communist country, right? We have US tech companies that may choose not to do business with the Department of Defense. The idea that DeepSeek would develop some sort of breakthrough that could be valuable to the military and then turn around and say to the Chinese Communist Party, I'm sorry, we agreed we weren't going to share this with you. It's laughable, and it shouldn't be a basis for how we structure our controls.
Yeah, and I just want to, we've had this conversation about this agreement, or this selling our chips, but we all know, and I just want to make this point before my time runs out, that we used to set a limit in Congress, and our BIS in Congress, and then NVIDIA would design a chip immediately underneath that standard. We just need to be careful we don't go back to that model as well. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to gentlemen for coming in, for testifying on this very, very important set of issues. I apologize, I was delayed in being here because we also had a very important hearing, sadly Democrats only, on the issue of Venezuela and what is next. And I do hope, I implore our chairman to make sure we have hearings, thoughtful hearings, including the White House, the administration, around the attack on Venezuela that was made with thorough planning and exquisite military ability, and absolutely no consultation with Congress. We are Congress. We are able to actually take in sensitive information and make decisions on behalf of the American people. On this set of issues, I thank you all for testifying. Mr. Feiner, I was thinking of you as I read your testimony. You rightly give the Trump administration, first Trump administration, I'll read from your testimony, deserves genuine credit, updating U.S. assumptions and strategies to make competition the hallmark of U.S. policy toward China. In your testimony, you also state that China's leaders increasingly see AI as not just one of many technology priorities, but as the critical technology that will enable their economic and military ambitions. And I'll say it again, their economic and military ambitions. Mr. Cass, you stated, any export of advanced AI chips or chip-making equipment to China must be understood as supporting its military, either by empowering its leading AI labs or by directly providing computing power to the People's Liberation Army. For both of you, can you talk more about what dangerous PRC military capabilities could be enabled by access to the most cutting-edge U.S. chips?
Well, it's interesting, Representative. I'll read you a quote that's not from my testimony, but frankly could have been, which is that advanced AI compute is essential to the AI era, enabling both economic dynamism and novel military capabilities. Denying our foreign adversaries access to this resource, then, is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security. And that quote is from the Trump AI Action Plan from July 2025. So I fully agree with that. I suspect, although I won't speak for them, my fellow witnesses today fully agree with that quote and believe that U.S. policy should be conducted consistently with that principle that's articulated there. In terms of what the specific dangers are of not adhering to that, we've talked about a number of them today. There have been recent disclosures, in particular in the cybersecurity domain, about very sophisticated, very advanced, and even effective AI-enabled cyber attacks that have been conducted by manipulating advanced large language models, an American advanced large language model in this case, but from a Chinese threat actor. That's one area of, I think, significant national security concern. We've talked as well about how AI can enable more sophisticated, more advanced military planning and the conduct of military operations, as well as intelligence capabilities. We've talked about the biotechnology implications, including the development potentially of novel weapons and pathogens. The list goes on. But the principle that was articulated in July 2025 by the current administration, I think, is one worth reverting to.
And what was the reason for the change? And I want to layer in the 25% fee to the United States government. What happened here?
I'm the wrong person to answer what the reason is for the change or internal considerations by this administration. On the fee that you described, again, I think they should answer how they think that is sort of broadly a beneficial thing. But what I would say is another good principle to adhere to is that that fee does nothing to mitigate the national security concerns associated with reducing the export control. So whatever other benefits are perceived, it does not diminish the concerns that I think all of us have expressed about enabling these very advanced chips to go to China. So I don't believe that paying your way out of those national security concerns is a good way to proceed.
To your point, and it won't pay your way out. It does not bypass the security concerns. And I know I have limited time, but Mr. Pottinger, Mr. Cass.
I would agree with what Mr. Feiner said. I would just add to your question about what has changed. You know, I think the public reporting has indicated that, unfortunately, members of industry that are very eager to earn money selling chips have had an outsized influence on what the policy has become, and that underscores why it is incumbent on Congress to act in the American people's interest.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I agree with that.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And absolutely, in addition to the classified briefings that this committee has offered on Venezuela, we'll make sure Democrats have the opportunity to complain about enforcing existing laws and conducting the arrest of criminals who have warrants against them like Maduro. And I now recognize Representative Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. The competition with the Chinese Communist Party in artificial intelligence is not theoretical, right? It's already shaping military power and economic strength. AI will define how wars are fought, how intelligence is gathered, and how authoritarian regimes project power beyond their borders. And there are many components to AI leadership. But the evidence shows that advanced compute is the single most important advantage the United States still has. and the CCP is determined to erode. Mr. Pottinger, based on your experience, how critical has chip access been in slowing or accelerating China's military and intelligence modernization?
Nice to see you, Representative Kim. A better authority than me would be Chinese AI scientists themselves, and they characterize it as a decisive issue. I had mentioned earlier in my testimony that one of the lead scientists of a leading Chinese AI firm just a few days ago at Tsinghua University, they held a summit, an AI summit, said we'd be lucky if we have a 20% chance of seeing a Chinese company as the lead AI company 5 years from now. And that's because they cannot make chips and they can't buy them until unfortunately now. So hopefully we'll be able to row that back.
You know, despite massive state subsidies, what are the real constraints China still faces in producing high-quality AI chips at scale?
There are many constraints. The equipment is not available for making the most advanced chips like those that are made in South Korea and especially Taiwan, and increasingly starting small in Arizona. And so that is a feature of export controls. And in fact, President Trump in his first term was really laid the foundation for this. The Biden administration built mightily on that foundation, and President Trump in his first few months continued to build on it further until sort of this inexplicable backtracking.
You know, are there warning signs that Congress should be watchful for? And that would indicate America's competitive advantage is being eroded before it becomes irreversible.
In other words, that the U.S. advantage, we should not take it for granted. Every month counts in this race. We're starting to see AI capabilities really taking transformational flight this year. And so every month counts, but my point is that people who argue that export controls are just, they don't work or they eventually atrophy, in this race, where every month counts, they're actually decisive. I think it's the most powerful tool we have to win.
You know, thanks to Chairman Mast for introducing AI Overwatch Act, we have now the legislative tool that provides an essential layer of congressional oversight of powerful American chips to make sure we are not ceding our innovative and sensitive technologies to adversaries. I know China is making advanced AI chips, but they also rely on the products that we are also selling to them, right? So I don't know if we need to enable them. But I just wanted to mention that in the time that I have, I want to talk about the export controls, right? They have worked, but only when they're clear, if they are enforced, and if they are aligned with our allies. And I'm concerned that loopholes and weak oversight risk undoing the process that we have made. So let me ask Mr. Cass a question here. Where do you see the greatest disconnect today between stated U.S. export control policy and how that policy is implemented in practice?
Well, I think the gap is exactly what we've been talking about here today, which is that our stated policy is we will deny computing capacity to our adversary, and yet our latest policy choices seem to be attempting to supply computing capacity to our adversary. So I guess that's a fairly large gap.
Mr. Pottinger, quickly, can you talk about how and where the U.S. export controls on AI chips been effective, and where are the biggest vulnerabilities?
They've been extremely effective in restricting frontier models, basically China's ability to catch up with the most powerful AI models. Export controls have prevented China's chip industry from being able to make their own chips and to catch up with Samsung and Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corp. So according to China's own leaders, Xi Jinping, in a sign of, I think, desperation, not confidence, is just thrown another $70 billion last month at $70 billion US dollars at trying to fix the gaps that they have in chip manufacturing.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I yield my time.
Representative yields back. Representative Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Maintaining American leadership in the AI arms race is critical to America's economy and national security. As the role of artificial intelligence increases, American-made chips have increased in demand globally. While such demand for U.S. exports is encouraging, Congress must work with the Bureau of Industry and Security to ensure that our export control regime prevents bad actors from obtaining powerful AI computing chips. We must ensure that our export controls support American businesses while preserving American security in both physical and the digital realms. Mr. Pottinger, a critical part of the AI race is controlling access to advanced computing power. Effective control requires effective enforcement, yet the Bureau of Industry and Security often lacks timely information about violations. The Stop Stealing Our Chips Act, which I introduced with my colleague, Representative Johnson of Texas, addresses this enforcement gap by creating a whistleblower incentive program. Can we win the AI race with export controls that lack effective enforcement?
We cannot.
And how important are whistleblowers to improving chip control enforcement?
Yeah, I'm eager to learn more. Anything that strengthens our ability to enforce is a step in the right direction. But you know, we should not kid ourselves that we'll be able to track where every chip or other piece of advanced technology goes in China. We'd be better off simply denying, having a presumption that we should deny that technology from flowing anywhere into the Chinese ecosystem.
And so what conditions, standards, and enforcement mechanisms would you attach to the sale of advanced chips to ensure that U.S. AI
If I may, sir, I would like to submit something after the hearing, after I've had a little bit of time to give you a more thoughtful answer to that.
Okay. And so, Mr. Pottinger, research from Georgetown's Center for Security and Emerging Technology documented how China's People's Liberation Army has accessed U.S.-made AI chips for weapons development. AI technology has empowered the Chinese Communist Party's surveillance state and the censorship of its own people. To win the AI arms race, we need to understand what we're up against. What can the Chinese Communist Party accomplish with advanced AI chips in terms of military, surveillance, censorship, and strategic applications?
Sky's the limit for them, because this technology is so pivotal that it means that all of it, nuclear weapons, biological weapons. China has a biological warfare program that is in violation of international treaties. Biology is an area where AI in the commercial space is already having major impacts. We should not assume that Beijing isn't looking for advantages from AI for biowarfare, and the list goes on.
Thank you. Mr. Cass, when we talk about the AI arms race with China, we often discuss it in national security terms. But what are the economic stakes if China achieves AI dominance?
Well, I'm glad we're talking about the economic side of it as well. Thank you for the question. I think what's so important about AI as a general purpose technology is it's going to diffuse everywhere in our economy. It's going to determine how well we innovate and advance in technology. It's going to determine how well we advance in healthcare. It's going to be incredibly important to manufacturing and our ability to rebuild our industrial base. And, right now, this is one of the few places where we really do have a technological lead over China, and something we can really lean on as we pursue the administration's agenda that's trying to reindustrialize. If we lose that advantage, we will find ourselves falling further behind in a number of areas where we have challenges now.
Thank you for your insights and the insights of the panel. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative Shreve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, I appreciate the testimony of our witnesses
I've been able to participate all morning, and I have learned a lot. I'm a freshman member, you're down to freshman row here, from Indiana, and I don't come out of the industry, but I have been planted here because this space is so important, and that we learn from those that have been wrestling with this, as you all have for many years, as we form policy. Congress, of course, passed the CHIPS Act back in '22, and that was led by my Indiana friend and colleague, Todd Young, $50 billion. And I'd point out that $50 billion because I'll make another point in just a moment. But those investments, both from domestic and foreign companies, were on full display at CES last week. I've been out there in the past, not able to do that in this role. But we see that dramatic innovation in AI, in part arising from our country's investment in that CHIPS Act. Mr. Cass, do you agree with the premise that our greatest strength in the AI arms race lies with our ability to ramp up domestic production of these very high-end chips?
I think it's definitely a force multiplier for us. We, right now, thanks to export controls we have had in place, have primary access to chips coming from our allies as well. The more that we are able to produce ourselves, the more we will control our own destiny.
Yep. Well, let me weave this in with a couple things that kind of tie back to my Indiana district. I mean, progress is clearly being made. We've had investments from companies like TSMC, Intel, MediaTek specifically has partnered up with Purdue University in West Lafayette for a newly opened semiconductor design center, proving out success there. So while we, the U.S., remain in a strong lead position over China, we lag in other critical inputs, in my view. My colleague Annie Barr, also from a coal state, made the point on energy. One stat I pulled is that by 2030, China's going to amp up their, I wasn't trying to be clever, but yeah, amp up their capacity by 400 gigawatts. That's like 40 Manhattans at peak demand. I mean, they're going to have a huge power advantage relative to us just by the end of this decade. Also, talent. We produce some good AI development talent in Indiana at Purdue, Indiana University, Notre Dame. But China's developing fully half of the AI engineering talent today. And then capital. The Chinese government's put $55 billion in toward this initiative. I mean, they're analog in some respects to our 22 legislation that Todd and Schumer led on. So, Mr. Pottinger, probably the best person to put this to, is it possible for the U.S. to win the AI arms race solely by outperforming China in production and computational power? Is it possible?
It's definitely possible, and by Chinese scientists' own admission, it's happening, especially at the frontier end. And it is primarily, as you point out, not because our scientists are better that we make more electricity. To your point, China can burn as much coal as they want. They build a lot of these plants very quickly. So the pivotal advantage that we hold is actually on compute. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing everything that we can to expand energy production, and that means traditional sources. It means, hopefully we'll have a breakthrough in nuclear fusion. There have already been breakthroughs in fission and relatively efficient and safe uses of fission nuclear. It's going to have to be in all, the whole pie chart of different sources of energy. So we should not assume that purely because of our advantage in compute that we're going to win. But if we surrender that advantage, forget about it.
But it is possible, in your view, to win.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good. My time has expired, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Davidson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for just a timely, very critical hearing and a topic that is absolutely vital that we get right. So I want to thank all of our witnesses for really one of the most essential subjects that we nail, which is artificial intelligence. I was proud this past month to join Chairman Mast's AI Overwatch Act as a co-sponsor. The reality is that the future of the global economy and our geopolitical security hinges on the future of chips and AI. Congressional oversight on this issue is vital. And I'm also the chairman of the subcommittee for national security and illicit finance. One of our main challenges this year is to update and modernize the Defense Production Act, which of course is used more broadly than in artificial intelligence. And I'll open it up to the panel. As we modernize the Defense Production Act with artificial intelligence in mind, but maybe more broadly, what things are essential that we get right?
Well, yeah, I think as your question implies, Congressman, AI, given that we have already a significant advantage in AI, that should be integral to our defense modernization. I mean, I've seen the posters at the Pentagon that, you know, I want you using AI. I mean, this should be one of the things that allows us to produce faster on demand without having to do these long-term contracts to produce munitions, for example. But that would be just one very important example is munitions. It doesn't do us much good to have the most exquisite platforms, ships, aircraft, and so forth in the world if they're going to run out of ammo quickly.
Yep, thank you for that. Mr. Feiner?
First of all, I agree with everything Mr. Pottinger just said. I would only add, and I'd want to come back with a more sort of specific answer as to the key areas, that the United States does not have state-owned enterprises that the government can just simply direct in areas of strategic importance or policy priority. But we do have certain tools available to us, and the Defense Production Act is a big one, that enable us in areas of kind of overwhelming national security importance to the country to direct the private sector in ways that are strategically consequential. And so this tool, I think, has not been used as much as it could have been and should have been over time. And so I think exploring ways in which, particularly for something as important as winning the AI race, using the Defense Production Act makes good sense and is a constructive area for Congress to focus.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, AI is going to go across lots of things. And so to the extent you talk about other sectors, really AI is just going to be integrated with how we deal with that. So the mantra of the Trump administration has been to de-risk critical sectors of our economy, and to some extent, particularly with respect to China. I was pleased to work with the committee to write and introduce the Biological Intellectual Property Protection Act of 2025 and to co-lead the effort with Representative Houlihan and in the House and Senator Cotton across the Capitol there in the Senate. Our biotech sector is one of the most important and promising innovation sectors for our economy. Our public and private R&D institutions are world-class leaders in creating next-generation cures. The unfortunate reality is that many of the labs that turn synthetic DNA code into usable sequences operate out of China, even if they are owned by American companies. Under Chinese law, all that IP goes through these labs becomes property of the Chinese Communist Party. Each year, billions of dollars in intellectual property are stolen through supply chain weaknesses such as this. Our bill would allow existing export control policies to regulate export of high-value biotech. Mr. Pottinger, Chinese IP theft spans nearly every information sector of the economy. How can we use export control policy to mitigate these risks?
I would still go back to the controls on powerful chips, and since AI is going to sort of supercharge China's advances or ours in the biotech space, so I think that this could be pretty powerful if we actually row back the mistaken decision to start providing China with advanced AI computing capacity. It actually gives us a leg up in biotech.
Yeah, thank you, and I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative Smith.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling this very important hearing. I read with great interest, Mr. Pottinger, your essay that you would send to us. Very well done. You point out that why 2026 could prove as important as 1989 and then build a narrative based on that. I would say one of the most important transformational things that happened under the Clinton administration was on May 26, 1994, Bill Clinton delinked human rights from trade. In a bipartisan way, we opposed that vigorously. I went to China before he did it because there were indications he was going to, which would just unleash hell on the human rights community there, democracy activists, and of course put us and everyone else at risk. And he just did it. And then by the end of the 1990s, or near the end, Christopher Cox did that very, very important piece, the Cox Commission, about how there was such a transfer, and courtesy of U.S. corporations and multinational corporations, of so much of our technology. And I worry a great deal, as I know you do as well and others, about how the inability, it seems, of many of the people who make a lot of money to see the implications of that dual-use technology. I had a hearing in here in 2006 on Google and Cisco, Microsoft, as they were transferring all of this technology to the Chinese Communist Party, and it's as if they didn't care. And, you know, I even quoted IBM and the Holocaust, a great book that talked about how IBM had aided and abetted the Holocaust and the Gestapo, and I said, here we go again, they're doing it. So my question is, or questions, I do co-chair the Congressional Executive Commission on China, whose mandate is to document the PRC's non-compliance with international human rights standards. Last month, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute issued a report on how China's new AI systems are reshaping human rights. One of the top-line points is that the CCP governance model is being honed into a, quote, precision instrument for managing its population and targeting groups at home and abroad. Among the developments is the ability to preemptively suppress dissent by predicting content before it's posted online. Sounds like something from the Minority Report, where crimes are preemptively stopped before they happen in that movie. Can you elaborate on the implications AI has under the control of the Chinese Communist Party on human rights issues? And what about preserving historical memory? You know, one of the things that even Google did, we actually showed it, when you did the Google search back in 2006, put in Tiananmen Square, nothing but happy pictures of people smiling and visiting the square. Nothing about the tanks, nothing about the Tiananmen Square massacre. How might that shape it?
Congressman, thanks for your decades of leadership on human rights. If we had listened to you all those years ago,
and others,
you know, well, it would be an even worse irony. I mean, we essentially, in pursuit of trade, sacrificed our principles on human rights 3 decades ago, which has put us in this difficult position vis-a-vis China. It would be an even more egregious foul if we were to sacrifice our national security in pursuit of trade. So let's not compound the mistake we made a quarter of a century or so ago. Look, we're already seeing ways that Beijing is using AI to surveil and to repress and to manipulate public opinion. And that's not only within China, it's now increasingly on our own shores as well. TikTok is, if you like, a primitive form of AI that has already had very destructive effects on democracy and free speech in the United States. And that's because there is plenty of evidence, and this is long before, you know, OpenAI was a major thing, right? We're talking about a technology that was developed years ago. They're able to either suppress speech through the algorithm, which is or to you know, promote speech. That's true of social media, but when it is regulated by not the United States government, where we have First Amendment protections, but in fact the algorithm is being governed in Beijing by a totalitarian dictatorship, it means we are sacrificing free speech in the United States by deferring to Beijing to decide what speech trends or is barely seen by anybody. So I think it only gets worse as the AI gets better, and that's why we don't want our AI regulated by Beijing. Beijing is going to be regulating our AI if Chinese companies are in the lead and their AI starts to become adopted heavily by much of the world, whether it's here in the United States, in Western Europe, with democratic allies, or in the parts of the world where most people actually live, in the global South, and all the places in between.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative yields back. Representative Baumgartner.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to congratulate you and thank you for holding this this great hearing. We had a great first year in House Foreign Affairs, and this committee is certainly off to a really fantastic start with this hearing. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here. I've read all three of you. I wish Mr. Cass was still here, but I've read all three of you on China. You all do really important work. Early this year, I had the opportunity to visit China as part of the first House delegation since 2019. Got to meet the Chinese premier, did a lot of research and study ahead of time, and really appreciated the trip. I just wanted to relay a couple things that stood out with me for me from the trip. We had dinner one evening with a number of Western ambassadors on the trip, and the comment that stood out most to me was one of those ambassadors said, "Hey, you think that America is trying to decouple from China? You have to understand that at whatever speed you think you're doing that, China is working at double the speed to decouple from you." So that was a comment that stuck out. Another comment that stuck out from that trip with me is we were meeting with the country head of a leading U.S. technology firm, and I was discussing and asking comparisons between India and China in the tech space and why they wanted to be in the country, given all the intellectual property theft, given the other issues. And this Western head of this Western company said, "We have to be in China because of the amount of innovation going on here in the country and what the competitive destruction that takes place in the aspects of China that are capitalist at the bottom end of their economy, the competitive destruction, that they needed to be there." So I just want to relay those two questions. One of the benefits of being, or those two comments, one of the benefits of being a freshman in Congress is you get the blessing of hearing so many people ask questions ahead of you that you don't have to go over retrod areas. But I would like to hear from both of you about data centers and the importance of data centers in the AI race. And then, as I look at China, I want us to avoid a war with China. And I think the best way to do that is prepare for war with China. So that's the prism in which, I look for things. I certainly, again, want to stress how much I want to war with China. But, China is strong but brittle. They have a lot of strengths in that innovation, the competitive bottom part of the country, certainly being a command dictatorship allows them some flexibility and speed, which we don't have. They're whipping our tail when it comes to power production. That's an us problem as much as it's a they problem. But they also have some real weaknesses that we know about in terms of their demographic challenges, their ability to attract and retain capital with their capital controls, the problems with the property sector, things that you guys have written and talked about. But, their other weakness is they alienate a lot of their near neighbors, and folks aren't exactly eager to sign up for Chinese global domination. So it seems to me, which is all a long preamble to say, that it seems to me that we should really be having this AI strategy conversation with our allies, particularly the Quad. And so if you could address, expand maybe a little bit on data centers, and then if you could also address what if you think that we should be having this conversation with our allies, whether that's a possible conversation, because folks that would have consequences from China leadership in the AI certainly will be us, but it'll be Taiwan and Japan before it's us. And I think it would be beneficial to members of Congress to think about this conversation with our allies and what might China and Taiwan like to see from us, and maybe the Indians as well too. So maybe you guys could go from there.
Congressman, thanks so much. And you're absolutely right, or whoever was your dinner companion was who said, look, China is trying to decouple from us a lot faster than we are from them. That is the explicit goal of their last 5-year plan. It was make the rest of the world dependent on us, make us, China, independent of the world. The premier of China, now late premier, Li Keqiang, when we met with him in 2017, he foreshadowed this. He said, it's only a matter of time, he said, before China dominates every technology of the future, including AI, and America will sell us nothing but corn and soybeans.
Just in time, can we hear from Mr. Feiner, maybe on the regional thing? And I apologize for speaking too long on my question.
Thank you, Representative. I very much appreciate you raising the issue of partners and allies as a sort of force multiplier for the United States. It is a unique American advantage in the world. There is no other country that has this network of relationships around the world that we have. Certainly China does not have that, largely because, as you indicated, they have a tendency, thankfully, to overplay their hand, behave in a coercive manner, and alienate countries that might otherwise be at least somewhat sympathetic to some of what they're trying to accomplish, which gives a big opening for the United States. The Quad, I agree with you, is a sort of foremost forum for discussing these issues. It tends to be more focused on economic issues, but it is increasingly, large part because of China's coercive behavior, been willing to take up issues of national security importance as well. And I think a very constructive area of diplomatic focus for the current administration certainly was for us, would be to enhance the Quad's focus on this exact issue at the nexus of critical and emerging technologies and national security.
Representative Molinar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Molinar,
allowing me
Chairman
to be
of the
part
China
of this,
Select Committee. Glad to have you join us today.
Appreciate the opportunity, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit. Industry leaders are continually highlighting the accelerating advancement of AI systems in both the U.S. and China, and it's already being used on the battlefield in Ukraine. I wonder if you could comment on how you believe that China, with its advanced technology development ecosystem and disregard for human life, will implement battlefield AI.
Congressman, nice to see you. This war in Ukraine, started by Russia, decisively enabled by Beijing, is a laboratory. And human beings are the guinea pigs who are being butchered in the service of advancing on the other side, Axis power wartime capabilities. So they are experimenting with a fully autonomous lethal drones, for example. And it's this cat and mouse game. It's only getting worse. And they're acquiring combat experience on the other side, not just Russians, but a whole division of at least of North Korean troops. There are reports from the Ukrainian government of Chinese soldiers, perhaps mercenaries, fighting there as well, at least hundreds of them. So yeah, we shouldn't think that there's some nice, neat prohibition among the Axis powers on using AI to the fullest extent possible to kill and win wars.
I'd only add, agreeing with everything Mr. Pottinger just said, that there is no doubt that in the context of what the two countries themselves describe as a no-limits partnership, the PRC and Russia, that we focus a lot on the support that China is providing to Russia in the context of that war. I am confident that support does not come for free. And one of the things that China gets back, in addition to trying to prop up really its only friend that has a geography in Europe, only significant friend, is that it is getting data from the battlefield. It's getting data on how the components that it is providing that go into Russian weapon systems are performing. It's getting data on how this new AI-enabled area of warfare is playing out in real time on the battlefield. And by the way, just as China is drawing that data, that information into its own military and learning lessons from that, we should best be doing the same, given how much work we are doing to provide help and support for Ukraine. Because as Mr. Pottinger said, this is a laboratory for modern warfare. It doesn't mean every war that comes after this is going to be the same. There are going to be significant differences, but we should be learning those lessons. And I'm confident that China is trying to learn those lessons.
Thank you. I wonder if also you could comment on recent reports. NVIDIA plans to ship up to 2 million H200 AI chips to China with plans to ramp up production capacity for even more. At the same time, we're hearing about reports of shortages of key AI chip components and that are leading to supply constraints for chips going to U.S. customers.
Thanks, Congressman. Yes, it's actually zero sum. Many of the Blackwell chips and other chips that American companies are buying from NVIDIA use the same components, high bandwidth memory, for example, that go into the H200s that NVIDIA is preparing to sell to our adversary in China. So it's self-evident that there will be fewer chips available for American companies as a result of building more chips for China.
First of all, I would associate myself with Mr. Pottinger's comments. The limitations on key inputs to chips are relatively fixed and finite. He mentioned, I believe, high bandwidth memory. That is the most consequential one, but there are others as well. And so I think one area of appropriate oversight and scrutiny is what exactly are the trade-offs, not just at the level of the fully finished chip itself, but at the level of the inputs to chips that will limit the ability of not just American customers, by the way, but allied customers from getting this product at the expense of the Chinese getting it.
Thank you both. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah. Mr. Rice, I have to go to Representative McCormick, if you don't mind, and we'll go to you right after that. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Rice, for yielding. Thank you for both being here on this very important topic today. I'm really excited about it because it actually talks about the future of our industry and our prominence in the world right now. I think it's been clear that our company should be the foundation of the global AI stack, and sometimes that's in jeopardy when we put limitations on our ability to sell abroad. One of the things that I was really excited about is when the President lifted the prohibition on exporting the H200 chips from NVIDIA, realizing that it's probably not even the second, it's not first tier, it's not probably even second tier, it's mainstream type chips that can be used on multiple computers and other technologies. But if we don't sell it to China, my question to you, Mr. Pottinger, is do you think that we become replaced by Huawei and other places that can produce something similar, and then we no longer become the industry standard, we become essentially the beta instead of the VHS for those people old enough to remember?
Thanks, Congressman, for the question. The odds that Huawei is able to gain on NVIDIA increase if Huawei has access to NVIDIA chips. That's the irony of this. That's the paradox. China has already made clear that they're never going to let NVIDIA dominate the Chinese market. In fact, even though the administration has offered H200, NVIDIA is offering perhaps millions of these chips. The Chinese government has not actually said that it's going to allow all of that to be imported, specifically because they want to make sure that they are providing, mandating the purchase of Huawei chips. So the goal, the explicit goal in Chinese policy and from the Chinese Semiconductor Industry Association is to ensure that Huawei dominates the Chinese market eventually, no matter what.
So what's interesting about that, we kind of brought this on ourselves when we limit our ability to sell abroad. Technologies can be otherwise produced. We lose that competition, and people go like, well, we need enough chips here. Well, we don't have a shortage of chips here. We can produce limitless numbers of chips. But what we've done is now created a gap which has been filled by another company, and now we're in this predicament. And that's where we're at right now. And ironically, if you read books like Chip Wars and you see what put us ahead of everybody to begin with, is when people start copying you, they fall behind. So as Elon Musk once said, I don't even worry about my patents. I only patent my stuff because I don't want people to keep me from using my own technologies. If you're copying me, you're behind me. But that's what the free market's all about, and that's one of the things I like to point out is that we should never restrict people from our basic technologies because we will lose our industry standard as the world trendsetter. And I think we put ourselves at a real big disadvantage last administration.
I agree with you. When we're talking about free market economies, friendly rule of law, law-abiding democracies, I'm in favor of not restricting at least allowing significant access by friendly countries to that stuff. China is not a free market system. It is a totalitarian dictatorship. And so, by the same, just like we wouldn't want to sell them F-35s in the interest of a free market, we should not be selling them, AI that they could use to create commercial and military dominance.
Sure, and I'll point out, once again, the H-200 is not a problem in that regard, so I'm glad the administration has taken the lift off that. Mr. Feiner, the GAIN AI Act, which is no longer an issue right now, but that's the kind of stuff that worries me when we start talking about a bill that would have restricted exports to China and other countries on the false promise the United States does not have access to chips, and I'm talking about the ability to produce enough for us here domestically. Do you think it's a good thing that we got rid of that, or do you think there's another way to look at this? Because I personally think we have plenty of chips as long as we don't inhibit ourselves.
Representative, I do support, without going into one particular piece of legislation or another, increased activity by this committee, by this body, to look at the concerns that we've expressed, those of us on this panel today, about the Chinese getting access to the most advanced technology that the United States produces. So whether it's the approach that you just described in that former piece of legislation or others that I understand are under discussion, I am for taking a hard look at this from this body, because I believe that U.S. policy is most effective when the executive branch and the legislative branch are taking mutually reinforcing steps consistent with our national security. And I do have concerns that the number of chips that can be produced is finite. Maybe it meets today's demand, maybe it doesn't, but by all accounts, demand is exploding, it predicted to explode in the years ahead. And there will be some trade-off as to who gets access to this most important input into the AI race that we've been discussing.
Hopefully we can adjust on the go. Thank you so much for the time, Mr. Chair.
Representative Issa.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here long enough for me to get done with my other hearing. I'm going to throw some numbers out here quick. Broadcom, $10.5 billion. Texas Instrument, $3 billion. Micron, $3.5 billion. NVIDIA, $17 billion, 13% market share. AMD, $6.2 billion, 24% market share. Qualcomm, in my district, $25.7 billion, 66%, and Intel, 29%, or $15 billion. That's the percent of that these U.S. companies have in sales currently to China. Those numbers ring pretty true to you?
I'll take your word for it, sir.
Okay, so is it fair to say, no matter what we might want to do, that we have a problem here, which is we are addicted to selling to China, just as we are addicted to buying from China? Is that sort of, using the addiction word, pretty fair?
It's a better use than the fantasy that will make China addicted to our things.
Okay, and I want to follow up exactly on that point, because I think you're exactly right. China wants one of everything we have, and notwithstanding Dr. McCormick, having been a manufacturer and a patent holder, I can tell you that I have the same product but cheaper is why you do enforce your patents often, is that even if they're copying and stealing your market share and dramatically undercutting you so you never get the volume on your innovation, you never pay for your innovation. So we have twofold. Clearly, Qualcomm cannot give up 2/3 of its sales today, particularly when those sales end up in Android products around the world that, if they were substituted, would effectively mean that they'd only be selling a fraction of that, and only for the U.S. market. So I want to follow up with one concept for this committee. During the Cold War, we decoupled from the Soviet Union. Midway through the Cold War, when Henry Kissinger, very rightfully so, saw an opportunity to create a wedge between China and Russia, we created an opening into China. That opening was, in fact, to deny, to a great extent, the Soviet Union that relationship where us versus them was the two of them. It's clear that they've reunited, but we have not decoupled effectively from China or Russia. Russia continues to supply a vast amount of non-AI products, mostly oil and so on. But China is both their crutch and our dependency. So is it fair to say, at the conclusion of this, that if we're going to win in AI, we have to wean ourselves off of dependency, decouple, while in fact continuing to push forward, that we have to do both if we're going to win the AI battle?
I agree with the sentiment. Yeah.
So if I could put it in the simplest terms, one that even a publicly educated kid like me would understand, we are back into a Reagan us or them time. The us is the free world, and the them is best known for China and Russia and their immediate allies. And that in an us or them world, as Ronald Reagan, when asked about what his strategy was, said, we win, they lose. Is that really where we are again? Exactly where Reagan inherited the Cold War, that we have to, in fact, win this by decoupling and by causing the rest of the free world to also decouple?
I think China is already decoupling rapidly from us, much faster than we've been able to from them.
And I'll follow up at that. If they decouple before we decouple, will they in fact have leverage with us that we cannot overcome?
That's their explicit strategy, what you just laid out.
Okay, in the 36 seconds left, if we do not provide the energy necessary to have our AI be ahead of their AI, if we do not ensure that the fabrication capability and the other technologies are invested in, do we lose that us or them advantage, one in which China then has the opportunity to deny us the ever getting back to a lead?
That is a very real and substantial risk.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, you have made this the most important hearing, not just of the day or the week, but perhaps of this Congress, because it does give us an opportunity to understand exactly what we're dealing with. And I want to thank you for holding it and yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. Representative Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. China's premier makes the claim that China seeks the world where the world can cooperate on AI. And he even argues publicly against AI techno monopolies. But that is not true. That's not the game China is playing. For the PRC, the goal has always been AI dominance, capturing the global market and winning the race against the US. Now, PRC is using the full force of its industrial policy to make that a reality. And this matters to the defense of our nation. Just last month, Secretary Bissett said it clearly: a golden dome is meaningless if China surpasses us in artificial intelligence. Now, Guam is America's front line in the Pacific, and just 2 time zones away from Beijing. Losing the AI race has real implications for our island and for a free and safe Indo-Pacific. So we must take a 2-pronged approach, I believe, in leading the world in AI while continuing to make investments in the missile defense system. And Chairman Mast understands this threat, which is why he assembled us together and is putting forth a slate of bills to tackle this problem. And part of tackling this problem is knowing the facts of China's AI ecosystem, from its manufacturing capabilities to its foreign inputs to its AI utilization and compute capacity. Without that awareness, our policymakers are blindly tackling a Goliath in the dark. And this is why I introduced China AI Power Report Act, which Congressman Vidman to create the first ever annual assessment of China's AI power to ensure our export controls are adaptive, targeted, and maintain our technological advantage. Of course, the time to act is now. And so, Mr. Pottinger, the Trump administration was the first to recognize the need for strategy on emergency technologies like quantum computing in 2018. Could you walk us through how China is leveraging its AI industry in other areas like quantum, biotechnology, and supercomputing? What does that mean for our national security, sir?
Thanks, Congressman. Xi Jinping talked about AI in his New Year's address this year. He understands that this is a fulcrum, right? This is the pivotal technology that allows all these other technologies of the future and the near future, quantum computing, all what we're seeing with advanced materials that are being invented, new biotech. As well as military capabilities. He sees this as so important that he is pulling out all the stops. In fact, while he's been leader, China has now spent more just on semiconductor manufacturing so that they can be very capable in AI. They've spent more than 4 times what Congress passed for semiconductor manufacturing in the Chips and Science Act in 2022, 4 times. Their economy is less than 2/3 our time, and they're spending 4 times that amount of money. So I think that all of those technologies you were mentioning, quantum, actually the lead, I think Xi Jinping is correct in identifying AI as the spark plug that is going to allow either us or a communist regime in China and their friends to dominate in that space.
I appreciate it. We got a minute left, and can you expand or let me know what's China's access to compute through cloud systems?
Yeah, that's very, very important. That's one of the big loopholes that the last administration was working to address, and that I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And that is, it does us no good to prevent Beijing from importing massively powerful AI chips, the most advanced chips, if they can just go to Malaysia and train their AI and utilize AI in data centers, on our shores or in third countries. So we want trusted companies and partner governments to be the ones that are actually stewards of this computing capacity.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this hearing today. I've actually been bouncing between here and education, where we've been talking about the effects of AI in education. I think this really boils down to 2 issues. The first is, do we not let China get our technology? And I think the chairman has a bill that will very effectively deal with that. But then I think the second part of it is, how do we make sure our technology becomes the standard for the world and not Chinese? So there's sort of an offensive and a defensive. I would describe the chairman's sort of defensive, don't get our stuff, an offensive, which I've got a bill called the Full AI Stack Export Promotion Act that would do to try to push our stuff out there to become the global standard. Now, Mr. Pottinger, we saw an aggressive push by China to include AI full stack into their Belt and Road Initiative with the goal of making countries stick to the communist AI ecosystem. My bill that I've talked about would direct the State Department to identify American technologies and promote them to our allies and partners so they stay in the American AI ecosystem. Can you explain how aggressively you think it is, or how important it is that we aggressively and securely promote our AI technologies, and how that counters China?
Yep, I'm strongly in support of American technology dominating the full stack in most of the world, not in China per se, where we're not actually welcome, right? But when we talk about the tech stack, it's important to remember it's not just the hardware, the NVIDIA GPUs and so forth. In fact, the further up the stack you go, the more valuable it gets. NVIDIA, I mean, to use maybe a bad analogy, if NVIDIA GPUs are the rails for the railroad, all of the things that enables in terms of AI applications, the data centers, the incredible innovations that are made possible through creative use of AI, those are the locomotives on the track.
I'd put it this way: the hardware creates the capability, the software creates the creativity. I mean,
that's right, and more of the value is there. So I would rather sacrifice, giving China some railroads in service of us making sure that we dominate the locomotives and all the way back to the caboose. That should be American companies in not just in the United States and competing for major industrialized economies, but for the whole world, global south and in between.
So I have one other question. Again, you're talking about software. So to use an analogy of sort of social media, China was able to weaponize TikTok as a vehicle, not only just sort of for, we're not talking about military benefit. We're talking a lot here about them using our technology for military, but TikTok was weaponized as sort of a propaganding and brainwashing exercise. If China's stack becomes the global standard, is there the ability for them to kind of use that, what comes out of AI, to engage in the sort of nefarious activities using AI that they have done than they have done with sort of things like TikTok? And I have to let Mr. Feiner answer as well, given that he's the better version of me. So I'm fine, you're finer, so you both can answer.
I'll start. I don't accept the last characterization. We can take that one offline. Representative, I think honestly the best argument for the importance of the issue that you've put on the table, which is the full tech stack, including software, the best argument that that is true, and that not only do we believe it's true, but that the Chinese, including their very top leadership, believes it's true, is that Xi Jinping himself launched a campaign inside China to purge American software. He called it Delete America, essentially. And you know, that is indicative of the fact that they believe that they have an unhealthy degree of dependency, and that they are going to try to do something to end that and to indigenize even this additional area of capability. So fully agree with you're putting this issue on the table with Matt's characterization that we have to be talking about the full tech stack, not just hardware, and I'll leave it at that.
Quickly.
Yeah, I associate myself with those remarks.
Okay. Yeah, look, what I would say is China sees us as the enemy. It's high time we do the same. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. We're going to conclude this hearing. I have a number of thanks to give. I want to start by thanking our panelists. Your testimonies were invaluable, so thank you. I think it says a lot, the number of members that came here to ask you questions and hear your responses. They valued what it is that you have for experience and what you brought here to say. I want to thank our members for their participation. I want to thank the administration, because this is something that they are working on, that they are rapidly looking at, both from the Department of War to the Department of Commerce. People have seen, obviously, BIS put out rules even as late as last night, looking to codify as members of Congress what takes place to make sure that anything that's exported doesn't rise above thresholds that we're going to have operating here in the United States of America, and that we're going to make sure things don't go to end uses for adversaries like China and Russia, Iran. And I think we can chalk Venezuela off the table in part, and we're probably pretty close to chalking Iran off the table in part, and Cuba's probably close to that list as well. But the administration is paying attention to this issue, and I thank them for that. And I thank your work, specifically, Mr. Pottinger, your work in this space previously. You helped advance and create that gap for the United States of America with what your work was in the 45 administration, and I thank you for that. And I want to thank, not to diminish anybody else, I want to thank our entrepreneurs in this country, number one. Our tech entrepreneurs and those companies and those engineers and the people working in places from Silicon Valley to Texas to Florida to every other state and beyond in this space. You've made such capable tech, such a capable stack, everything that you outlined incredibly well, that we have to have a hearing like this. Because like I opened up with in my opening remarks, when we're talking about chips, it's not just kids that are playing first-person war-fighting video games. It is affecting real war, real weapons systems, real battles, real decision-making, and real casualties. Those are some of the stakes. The stakes go well beyond that, but those are just some of the stakes about what is at play in this debate. And so I thank everybody for bringing in their expertise. I thank industry for their effort to educate Congress over the last year and beyond. Very specific effort by industry to come in behind closed doors, talk to members of Congress about every level of the stack and what we should be thinking about, concerned about, educating people has been a very purposeful effort. In that, I thank again the witnesses for your testimony, members for their questions, and members of the committee may have some additional questions for you witnesses, and we will ask that you respond to these questions in writing. And in that, this hearing is adjourned.